All right, guys, what is going on? We haven't done a mutant in the mouth in a while, but this one is going to be a little different because I have my CEO of MIT 45, Uprising, and a few other brands, Ryan Niddel, who is the finely dressed gentleman um, in the podcast. And I also have David Demesquita. Do I say it right?
Demesquita. Yeah, close enough.
Demesquita. Oh, it's actually it's actually, okay. I thought it was SQ like a K.
No,
David D. Squeeze. I can't even say it. That
it's
Dynamite
mosquito with an A at the end. That's the easiest
David
way
D.
to remember it.
Mosquita. Okay, I got
Yeah.
it. AKA Dynamite D on IG. And IFBB Pro, the man, the myth, the legend, Nathan Spears is on here as well. I've talked to you gentlemen before, have never had a podcast. And I brought this to Ryan's attention because I think this is something that needed to be done a long time ago. Me and my former business partner did one when we first started Uprising Extracts. And we got a lot of heat for talking about Kratom on YouTube, and people were blasting me and trying to say that I used the Mutant in the Mouth platform and YouTube as a way to promote the product, even though it was all educational. But to give you guys a little background of how I know Ryan before we get into anything, I met Ryan about, it's got to be close to 15 years ago. Ryan was a gentleman who owned, it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. He owned a suit company, but it also came with an app. So I bought, I did 7 Olympias, and I think I bought 7 suits from Ryan. Ryan would fly to my house, fit me for a suit with this app, leave my house, come back to my house with the suit. If it didn't fit, he refitted it again, sent it back out, came back, and I bought 7 suits from him. And then we remained in touch, not every day, but I always considered Ryan a very good friend. We were very cool. We went to a lot of shows, hung out. And then 2.5 years ago, I was at the Olympia with me and my former business partner, and I had my own booth. I was selling Quadro gear, and we just had a little Uprising Extracts, which is what it was called back then, booth set up. And Ryan, always in a nice, fine dress suit, comes walking over, and he's like, "What's all this?" And I go, "Oh, I said I started a Kratom company like a year ago." He's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, why?" He goes, "Well, we need to talk." And I'm like, "About what?" He goes, "I need athletes, and I'm the CEO of MIT 45." And I was like, "Wait, you're the CEO of like one of the largest Kratom companies in the world?" And I had no idea. So it was a pretty cool moment when Uprising ended up joining MIT 45. It was a full circle moment for me. Brian's been one of the, for 15 years. There's not a lot of people I can say that never fucked me over, never screwed me over, never badmouthed me, and has always done right by me. And Ryan's one of the most loyal guys, not in this industry, in my entire life that I've ever met. And, joining MIT 45 has been absolutely life changing. And in the past couple months, there has been a lot of shade being thrown at Kratom. And although I say Kratom, after talking to you, Dave, and you, Nate, and obviously Ryan already knows, people have a very big misconception of what they're referring to when they talk about Kratom. And we'll get into the 7-hydroxymetragenine talk in a little bit. But I talked to Ryan, and I know Nathan was very vocal about his take on Kratom. David, you were too, and I don't think you guys really understood the whole 7OH thing until I called you guys, and we had very long, drawn out conversations about how it becomes present in the leaf and what it actually is and how strong it is and why it's so dangerous. So I'm going to open up the floor. And one thing I love about Ryan, he doesn't hide from the bad, because he'll say there's good and there's bads to everything. And just before we started, he said, "I don't want everybody taking Kratom. It's not for everybody." And I think that needs to be highlighted in this industry, because we're in a fitness vertical where bigger, stronger, faster means I want the best, I want the strongest, I want more, I want the next best thing. And then it becomes a very big problem with certain products. So I'm going to let Ryan real quick take the floor and just give his background and why he's so knowledgeable in the Kratom world and what he's doing with things like the AKA, the KCPA, that a lot of people really don't know, and why our labels say what they say. So I'm going to let Ryan take the floor for a little bit, because I want him to just give a little background on why he's on here and why I think he's so valuable and knowledgeable in this field of Kratom, or herbal supplements, as we'll call them.
Great. And Guy, thank you. Dave and Nate, thanks for making time as well. I'll certainly share as you're listening to us, that the goal for this to me is not to convince anybody to buy Kratom. It's to get positive information out that shows both sides of the aisle. I think that we as a society are in this polarizing space right now where everything's either one far extreme or the other. And I'm hoping that over a long enough duration of time with neutral information coming out, we can kind of merge back to the middle. And that's the goal of this. It's not to say that Kratom is the best thing since sliced bread. I actually don't think it is. I wasn't a founder of our company. I didn't know what Kratom was until 2019. I didn't consume my first Kratom until 2021. And I was a consultant for our business, then stepped into a COO role, then became a partner. It wasn't until I became the CEO that I actually tried our own products, right? I call it the art and science of business. So to me, so much of this is to say, I'd ask as you're paying attention to this episode, just keep an open mind, right? Post all the comments you want, post all the shade you want, because that's how we actually get the good information out. And anything I share is, I'll say, anecdotal. I think it's always important when we talk about Kratom consumption. It's not FDA approved. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. It's in this murky space where the FDA is still trying to figure out how to even classify it. It's a new food ingredient which has its own unique carve out. And so any implied benefit that could come from this is just personal and connotation and annotation to my personal experience of consuming our products. So I share all that as um, a fun way to get into a little background. Studied mechanical engineering in college. Numbers and science are kind of my thing. That eventually led to, of all things, running a high-end car dealerships. So I'm a car guy through and through. Talk about cars. That's a second passion of mine. That led to a web hosting company that I came on as an affiliate manager and eventually took over as president and CEO. We ended up selling that to a subsidiary of GoDaddy, gosh, about 12 years ago. That then, kind of skip over this next part, I launched a high-risk merchant processing company and thought I knew everything at 29. I realized by, just about after my 30th birthday, I didn't know anything and I was broke after all the money from the exit, which then led me to starting a custom clothing brand, right? That's how I got introduced to Guy. Back then I was an amateur bodybuilder running, if I wouldn't leave a syringe with any empty space in it. I'll say it that way, right? It just seemed like a waste to me. There was always something more to go into it. And so I'm not bashful with some of those things that I would have done differently in reverse, but it's who I was. It's part of my story. Anything from DNP to insulin, HEA, you name something, I've certainly experimented and tried, only to be at best a mid-level amateur. So I'm by no means anything special. That then led to spending time with Guy, like he said, making him some suits, designing an app, doing some fun things that way. Sold that company off. Started a CBD company in 16, sold the CBD company December of 18, which then led to consulting, right? I had a podcast for a long period of time called 15 Minutes to Freedom. It's still around somewhere in the internet. All that was all the stuff you're not supposed to talk about. Anabolic steroid use, infidelity, failed businesses, the stuff everybody runs from. It was 7 days a week, 500 and I think 30 consecutive episodes,
Wow.
never miss a day of just putting it out there. So I am not afraid whatever stuff comes out of this conversation. I don't want it edited. I don't want it altered. Like, this is just real conversation around hopefully four men that want to have a spirited debate and conversation to get good information out. And so that's kind of that's what I stand for. That's what we've then brought to the table at Mid 45 over the past, 4 or 5 years. And it's been an evolution, right? From 2019, 2025, there's different science, there's different knowledge, the industry is changing so rapidly that what things I would have shared 3 or 4 years ago are now untrue. They're unfactual. They were factual at the moment I shared them. They've proven to be unfactual, and I'm not afraid to go down that route either. So I just appreciate having this format to have a conversation, and want to just keep reiterating. If you're curious about Kratom, curious about any substance you're going to take, spend time researching the pros and cons. We actually have a website that we've launched called KRI.org, which is the Kratom Research Institute.org. All that is combining all the information we can find online. If there's a wrongful death lawsuit, what's going on with it? Why is it out there? What are the pros and the cons? If there's 7-hydroxy information, what's the good and the bad of 7-hydroxy? Just there's no backlinks to buy product. You can't buy product. It's not a way to gain information. It's just, how do we get neutral information out into the world so people make a better decision? That's really all I care about at the end of the day.
So, Nate, I know you had a kind of intricate story. If you can share as much or as little as you want, because I know you told me stuff on the phone that I actually didn't know. Yeah. So I know you were very vocal. I know you and Chris Pantano were going back and forth a little bit about the Kratom. And I know you were kind of bashful about it. And then, you and I talked and we came to at least a neutral and mutual understanding. So give me the background of like your background, how you got where you came from, what kind of stuff you went through, why you started taking Kratom, and then kind of things that happened leading up after that.
Yeah, for sure. So some people may know, but I'm pretty open about it. I have a pretty big addiction history. I have a pretty big story. I'm a recovering heroin addict. So when I was in 2012, I finally had gotten clean after 3 rehabs. I was homeless. I was in prison. So I've seen it all, and I have many experience with other addicts. So I have a very intricate field in addiction, I like to believe, and having that kind of knowledge. So for me, I had been clean for quite a while, and that's how I got into bodybuilding. I got clean and started bodybuilding, and it really excelled at it. And it was like my other addiction, my other medicine, right? So it was really just a blessing for me, and it's given me so many blessings in life. To sort of speed up the story, the problem that I have is I feel like there's a lot of gray area with Kratom and a lot of the sponsored athletes we look up to. You know what I mean? These guys are our heroes. They're pro bodybuilders, are some of the best in the world. We take their word for what they say. And a lot of these guys are, sort of saying it as, oh, it's a pre-workout. It's like caffeine. It's like nicotine or something like that, which in my opinion, I don't believe it to be this case because from my research, Kratom is an opiate, partial opiate antagonist. You know what else is also a partial opiate antagonist is Suboxone to come off of heroin. And a lot of people are hooked on that for many years. So there's a little bit more serious level, I think, as what it's being advertised as. And that's sort of where I'm coming from. A lot of these athletes, I feel like, don't have the knowledge of addiction. They're sort of ignorant and sort of blindly advertising it. So for when I started taking it, and I took it like about a year ago, just a MIT 45 gel packet. And when I took it, my problem is I'm an addict. So, at the time, I didn't really think much of it because A, it's legal. So it's easy to justify, oh, it's legal. Why would there be anything legal that's harmful out there? You know what I mean? I took like half a packet. I felt amazing. It also made me feel just like an opiate, in my opinion, because I have many experience of like Oxycontin, morphine, Dilaudid, you name it, I've done it. It had a very similar feeling as uplifting, social, made me feel great. It was almost like an antidepressant, right? And also helps with like pain, right? And I could train harder. I could do cardio easier. The problem with, I find opiate and opiate-like substances, there's no immediate intoxication feeling. There's no crash. There's no hangover. So it's very easy, like cocaine, liquor, drug, you know what I mean? Stuff like that, meth, you feel like shit after, you know what I mean? You have a hungover feeling. With these kind of products, you don't really have that hungover feeling. You just sort of come down and you're like, okay, that's fine. But the problem is there's a lot of addicts in this industry and addictive behaviors, like we were talking about before, just steroids. A lot of us are doing more and more and more. We don't want to think twice about it. And the problem is too, like, I think a lot of us get in prep and we don't really think about it. And, we sort of justify it in our heads. Hey, when prep's done, I'm just going to come off this. Well, for me, that was me. I was sort of just telling myself, oh, this is fine. I'll just get through prep. It helps with cardio, helps with like hunger, some stuff. And just like training and etc. I felt better throughout the day. Essentially, I wasn't suffering as much. The problem is when I came off of prep, I was still on MIT 45. I was using the gel packets. I loved them. But when I came off of prep, I stopped and I did get cold sweats. I did get a feeling of like withdrawal symptoms. Yes, I was probably taking more than I should have. I was probably taking, 3 or 4 of the packets throughout the whole day, which is obviously a lot. The problem is, like I said, when you have the prep goggles on, you know what I mean? You don't really, it's easy to justify that. And then you're like, oh, when I get done prep, I'll be good and I'll just be able to do this. Well, it's not so easy. You know what I mean? So that was my experience with misusing. And I think the problem is too, yes, 7.0 is much stronger, way more potent. The withdrawals are way harsher. The tolerance gets very high very quickly. It's way worse. I will totally agree with that. But I do think misusing and MIT 45 can still cause withdrawal symptoms. It's still a partial opiate antagonist. So there is still some of that hitting that opiate receptor, in my opinion. So that there can be some danger there, especially with people, like I said, I just don't think it's being advertised or sold, like promoted properly. Like I see a lot of these athletes saying it's like caffeine. I've never felt like that. Stop taking caffeine. You know what I mean? So I think there just needs to be more education and awareness. Is like, hey, here's a recommended dose. If you go over this dose, you're sort of playing with fire. You know what I mean? which I don't really see. And I made a post, obviously, like Guy said, because one of my friends ended up in the hospital, but that was from 7-0. I will say that it wasn't from at 45. But the problem is a lot of these guys, when they go through this feeling, they don't know how, they have no addiction history. So they have no awareness of, hey, what am I feeling? Why do I feel like this? So there's no education on addiction in the bodybuilding world. The problem is a lot of bodybuilders just don't know anything about addiction. So when they go through these feelings, they don't know what to do. So like our friend there, you know, it was 7-0, I will say that again, but he didn't know what to do. So he went right to the hospital, you know what I mean? Because he didn't know what was going on. He didn't know what he was feeling. It's like, why am I feeling like this? You know, because if you first time you ever go through an overdrawal like that, if you don't know, it just sort of happens. And you're like, you don't even know what's going on. You're like, why do I feel this? Feels like the flu times 10. It's like living hell, honestly. A day feels like a year. It's horrible. So essentially I did, you know, I threw out my back. And here's another problem I find with Kratom is, yes, it's not all equal. The T is one thing, misogyny is one thing, and then you got the 7-0. Well, the problem I find is when you go into these gas stations and head shops like me and Guy talked about, they advertise as, hey, this is for sleep. This is for mood uplifting.
Kratom extract, and they call it Kratom extract.
And then it says, this is for pain, the 7-0, right? So I throw it my back. I'm just thinking, oh, I'm in a lot of pain. I'm going to take the one for pain, 7-0. Well, the problem is those become highly addicting. And once you start taking 7-0, you can't go back to MIT-45 because your tolerance is through the roof. You have to take more and more. I was almost spending like $80 to $100 a day on 7-0, to be honest with you. And towards the end of it, you know, I would try to quit and then I would get back on it. And it was like the tolerance was higher. I was like using more, you know what I mean? So it was like a vicious cycle, you know, I couldn't get off it. And it was like struggling. A lot of people do, you know, and the problem is I find like a lot of these companies too, like me and Guy were talking about, you can go into a smoke shop and then now they put 7-0 in something that like liquid, but you can't even read it. You got to take your camera out and take a picture.
It's big.
And yeah, so it's pretty messed up, you know, and I do agree. I think there's no place in this world for 7-0. I think it's like, honestly, like the devil's fucking stuff. And, you know, I think if you can advertise, you know, misogyny as like I'm talking about and be more upfront about it, then that's sort of where I'm sort of coming from as far as like, especially these, like I said, these guys in prep, let's be honest, we've all been in prep. We all have that sort of feeling of like, whatever's going to make us feel easier, softer, you know, it's easy to sort of get into that sort of and justify it, you know what I mean? In our heads, like, okay, I'm just going to do this until prep's done. And then, you know, because I did talk to other people that weren't addicts and they didn't try 7-0 and they sort of did run into the same problem. It's not as severe, like I said, but, you know, they stopped taking it and then you get the cold sweats and you sort of don't want to train. You have no motivation. So that's sort of where I'm at. Luckily, you know, I'm about 3.5 weeks clean, 100%, no THC either. So I just sort of got off everything and started back on my journey. But I feel great.
Congratulations on that, dude. Thank God.
It was hard, honestly. It was brutal. So 7-0, like I said, from like I would say September till fairly recently, you know, 3.5 weeks ago, was all 7-0. So I was using all that.
Yeah.
Like I said, once you start using that, you can't go back to MIT-45 just because it's so much stronger and it doesn't do anything. You know what I'm saying? So
Dave, I'm gonna come to you in a second, but I just want to touch on some things that Nate said. So there's a lot of things with the American Kratom Association and something called the KCPA, which is the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. That Ryan is one of the guys that is pretty much, I don't want to call Ryan a lobbyist, but he pretty much is working a lot with higher ups to counteract a lot of that stuff that you're saying, because he's not going to disagree with a lot of those things, which is if you look at MIT-45 and Uprising, we actually have on our labels maybe habit forming, because they have found that Kratom is almost like a cup of coffee where it becomes a habit. But in order for something to be classified, and Ryan, you can correct me at any point if I'm wrong with anything that I'm saying, in order for something to be classified as addictive, it has to go through stringent testing and has to either pass or fail whatever testing they're doing. Kratom is found to be habit forming. So we do have on our labels habit forming or maybe habit forming. And with the 7OH, whether it be MIT-45 or Uprising, if you look on the back of, let's say this is a Super K shot, 7OH is less than 1%. So we actually make sure that we have the lowest percentage of 7OH in our product. And it's legible. You guys can see, I mean, I'm not even close, and you guys can pretty much see how, you know, the label. And a lot of those things you were talking about are the things that upset myself and upset and piss off Ryan because of a lot of the things you're saying. So I want Ryan to touch a little bit on those things as far as the label, the 7OH, and understand what we're doing as MIT 45 and what Ryan's doing individually to try to fix a lot of these problems. Because I think when you guys hear the extent of what Ryan's doing to fight for the things that you're saying, it'll be shocking to hear that a Kratom company is standing up for the things that actually, Nate, you were talking about.
So thank you, Guy, and Nate specifically. Thanks for shedding light on the truth. Just full stop. Everything you just shared to me is 100% truthful. And I'd like to take a little moment to share things that I had no idea about that then I think might paint a slightly different picture of why we're in this really unique quagmire of a space. I think it starts with understanding the classification of Kratom from the FDA. And I have to acknowledge the FDA is in a really challenging spot. They're understaffed. The same people that are in charge of dietary supplements, dietary ingredients are also in charge of food. It's very challenging from an FDA standpoint. So I'm a pro FDA person. I don't think they're out to hurt people. I think they have a job that's never going to be done, and I don't think there's any way for them to win. And so to start with, the FDA looks at Kratom as a new food ingredient. Why that matters, which I had no idea about, is a new food ingredient, you are not able to make a structure or functional claim or share any implied benefit from consumption. So instantly, as one of the largest companies in the space, I can't tell you what our product does. I can't tell you how it may interact with your body. I can't say any of those things. If I do, it's a huge target on my back immediately. And it's saying, well, holy shit, I want to get the information out because we have a ton of information, but I don't ever want to get us in trouble with the fact of implying the fact that one size fits all, because it's not deemed a dietary ingredient. It doesn't, so this is a whole nother conversation to be had. So if we understand the fact that there's a handful of us, and we're not the only company in the Kratom space that wants to, I'll say, have really transparent information out, we're working back and forth with the FDA to try to figure that out collectively, because it all starts with just what can we talk about and how can we talk about it. As we look at that part, to me, it's probably important, Nate, from what you shared, to share a little bit of the background on Kratom, which again, I didn't know about. Kratom really only grows regionally in two places, Indonesia and Thailand. It's about a 250-acre farm in South Florida that's coming online. The reason for that is the gestation period of Kratom, it's about 5 years. Kratom is a tree, right? When I first got in the space, I thought it was like cannabis stock. I thought it was, quick, in 6 or 8 months, it's growing and you can alter the genes. These are full trees that actually Indonesia replaced their rubber tree farms, because rubber trees, when rubber companies figured out how to synthesize rubber, there was no need for the rubber trees. And one of their largest exports went away, and they switched a lot of their crops over to Kratom. So they almost look the same. And as you look at that, then to me, just scientifically, having a little bit of that background, looking at the genealogy of Kratom itself, it's actually a cousin to a coffee tree, which I had no idea about. So it's closer to coffee than anything else on the planet genealogically. Well, who knows what that means other than it's just information, right? I'm not implying that Kratom is coffee because it's not coffee. But then I look at it and say, if there's a continuum, and Nate, I lost my best friend to an overdose. I know a little bit about addiction from being on the other side of that conversation. So I commend you for being clean and fighting the good fight and going through what you went through. And as I say that, I look at if water has a 1 level of addiction and heroin has a 10, we look at coffee as probably a 5, right? There's some people that they wake up, don't talk to them until they get their cup of coffee. It's a ritualistic sense. It's right. Do they need it or not need it? Are they having cold sweats if they don't consume it? Probably not. They're just irritable. They get a headache. There is a physiological response from not consuming it. Kratom then, as studied by Johns Hopkins, so not MIT 45, we didn't sponsor the study, they would put it at somewhere between a 5.75 and a 6 on that same continuum scale, because some individuals have this incredible propensity for loving the way they feel, and so they want more of that, which I get, right? I think as human beings, something feels good, we want more of it. I mean, look at pornography, look at alcohol, look at tobacco, look at weightlifting. I mean, shit, it's like it's all a version of the same. Not trying to water down Kratom. Kratom is different than weightlifting. Kratom is different than alcohol. By no means am I saying it's all the same. So to me, I start looking at that and saying, okay, we can't talk about what it does. I can share some background on it and how it works. I can share some of the sister or cousins in the genealogical side. Then we have to get into the mechanism of action. Mechanism of action starts with just understanding kratom as a whole. If we hopped on a plane and went to Indonesia or Thailand, or even now down south of Miami, and tested a tree with a leaf on it, that leaf, while being alive, has 0 7-hydroxymetragenine present. It's not in a living plant, which then by the nature of it makes it a metabolite, because it's as the leaf starts to degrade, that starts to become present. So everything in our world starts with biomass, as I refer to it, leaf that gets ground up, and we make sure it's safe and pure and all these different things. And over the course of Mid45, right, we've been around since 2012. I'll make up a number, and this is arbitrary, but we probably tested 100,000 plus kilos of biomass at a minimum. When you look at that kilo of biomass, we have never tested a kilo of biomass that comes in with more than 0.72% 7-hydroxy by volume. It's very trace. It's negligible. It doesn't really exist, if you will. From the nature of that, as we look to create our 45% extract, which is kind of what we're known for, Mid45 across the board, that 45% extract, it takes roughly 60 kilos of biomass to make 1 kilo of 45% pure extract. And that 45% pure extract at that point has 0.3% by weight 7-hydroxy. We get it down by happenstance. It ends up becoming lower during our process. I mean, we've now filtered it out and are pushing it out, but this is a fine line because the FDA has conducted studies called a single ascending dose study on just raw powder, right? Biomass. And anywhere between 2 grams and 12 grams of biomass, they saw no stated adverse effects other than some upset GI. Well, if you've ever consumed 12 grams of kratom leaf, like, well, no shit. It tastes horrible. It doesn't mix up well. It's not an easy method of consumption. Well, that 12 grams, roughly 1% of biomass ends up being metragenine, right? So you kind of look 12,000, 12 grams equals, 120 or 1,200 milligrams. And so we're at 1% or 12,000 milligrams. Now you get into basically 120 milligrams of extract. It's kind of how all that math would back itself out. And the FDA, this is public information, this is public domain. The FDA said we didn't see anything wrong with it. They tested on human beings, they tested it in vitro and in vivo, so in cell cultures as well as in rodents and into human beings, and they couldn't find something wrong. Why I think that becomes important, and where we're in a little bit of a sticky spot with Mid45, we know how to get rid of 7-hydroxy. It can be completely out of all of our products. But then we've altered the original chemical profile of a leaf that's supposed to have this global constituent of alkaloids, right? Because the FDA tested leaf that has 0.6 or 0.5 or 0.7% 7-hydroxy by volume. So if we take too much out, now we're adulterating a substance. And so if the FDA approves it, now what we've adulterated wouldn't be approved. This is how crazy the world is. Like, it's not as cut and dry as we'd like it to be. Yeah. And so you take all that and just think mathematically. This is my instant rub with 7-hydroxy. If it takes 50 to 60 kilos of biomass to make 1 kilo of 45% extract, and that 1 kilo of 45% extract is 0.3% by volume 7-hydroxy. Scientifically and mathematically, there's not enough biomass on the planet to make enough kilos of 7-hydroxy to go into a 30 milligram tab of 7-hydroxy. It wouldn't work, not at scale, not with how rapid this stuff is getting out there. My issue with that is that then means the product is synthesized. Right. The FDA is very clear on synthesization requires a pharmaceutical pathway versus dietary supplement pathway. Right. I think 7-hydroxy has an incredible benefit to the world as a pharmaceutical indication that's a natural pathway to Suboxone. I think you can get off of pharmaceuticals by using something like a 7-hydroxy if it was prescribed and went through a whole different pathway. However, we as Mid45, I don't condone it. I think it's a horrible product. I can show lab rat studies that not only, I think it was the University of Florida conducted, but we also had some conducted in India, that we compared 7-hydroxy to morphine. Chemically, the closest to the same. 7-hydroxy is somewhere between 10 and 30 times more potent than morphine in shock tests to a rodent's tail to see if the tail would flick up if it was, kind of like a TENS machine. So we're not killing rodents. It's just a little zap. 10 to 30 times more potent and 20 to 40 times more addictive than morphine. And this is stuff that's just now out there. But then when I say that, as you're listening, it's like, well, hold on. This is the same stuff that's in Kratom. So then isn't Kratom bad? Because it's in there. It's a percentage of it. The challenging part is there's so many challenging parts. In 2016, Q4 of 2016, the FDA and DEA were going to ban Kratom, right? Full stop, Schedule 1, gone. So before I came into the industry, my partners at that time were fearful of going to prison, and so they incinerated all of our product, literally all of it into Q1. No product, what the hell are we going to do? DEA, and the only time the DEA has ever done this that we can find, they reversed their ruling in Q1 of 2017. No longer was it scheduled. They backed it down and said, hold on, we don't have enough information. Why that becomes important is because from 2017 to 2020, nobody in their right mind would invest in any level of additional research studies because you're just waiting for the industry to be shut down. So there's this 3 or 4 year gap where no company is doing research. It's like, oh, this is going to go away. Then you get through COVID, you get to the backside of it. And it's like, this is a real industry with real legs to it now. The FDA is not shutting us down. So now we start investing in scientific research studies. If you're not familiar with the scientific research study process, which I was not whatsoever, you have to have someone that's agreeing to do the study that the FDA likes and signs off on. You have to get an independent review board to sign off on it. You have to say what the indications are for. You have to start with cell cultures and then go to some sort of rodent or animal and then eventually into human beings. And if you're super lucky and everything goes the right way, you're 18 months and you're at least $1 million to get any level of research done at all. And so it's like this incredible trap door of how do you figure out how the symphony of alkaloids that are naturally occurring, right? I have habit forming behaviors. The difference between habit forming and addictive is needing pharmaceutical intervention, right? Needing something to prescribe to you to get off of a product. That's how the FDA deems addictive versus habit forming. Just means you like it and you want more of it. How do we figure out what's going on with the constituents of alkaloids, kind of the whole symphony, without long-term studies that are going to span 3 or 4 years that are $5-10 million, which we're okay with. It's worth the investment. The challenging part is what we're running into inside of the Kratom world, the same thing that the CBD world ran into. CBD came out. I sold CBD in 2016. My parents thought I was a drug dealer. They thought I was selling pot online. They didn't understand the difference. They didn't understand the cannabinoid pathways. Then all of a sudden, some really creative pharmacists figured out a way to create Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, THCV, THCB, like all these derivatives. And so now it's just a game of whack-a-mole, which we're getting into with Kratom. Like we knew how to make 7-hydroxy 2.5 years ago. And when we saw what it did, we said, absolutely fucking not. Let's never do this. Let's suppress the information. Let's not get it out to the public because we don't want to harm people. But it's like, Nate, how in the hell do we get information out that shares what I'm sharing here? Because at some point you just tune out. You're like, I don't give a shit about this. What's it do for me?
Yep.
Well, on one side, if we believe from our research that 25 milligrams of metragenine is a suitable serving. I also am very clear on serving versus dose.
Yep.
If you say dose, it implies a pharmaceutical benefit. If you say serving, it's more a nutritional supplement or food. So I don't say dose, I say serving. Just splitting hairs, but it's one of those things with me.
He corrects me all the when I used to do it. So I don't do it anymore, but I used to say dose constantly. He used to be like serving. Okay.
So we believe a serving should be 25 milligrams of metragenine. By the nature of that, if you have full alkaloid constituents below that, your 7-hydroxy consumption would be, in our products, less than 0.3% of that, right? Trace elements. In saying that, it's stated that the half-life of Kratom is somewhere between 4 and 7 hours. We believe it to be 6 from our in vitro and in vivo studies, which means we recommend no more than 25 milligram of consumption, no more frequently than once every 6 hours. Don't exceed 4 servings a day. Because we think if you consume it that way, you get the implied benefits without a risk of the downside aspects to it. Now, 25 milligrams of metragenine in the gel pack that you were taking, McGo, it has 150 milligrams of 65% extract. So in that entire product, just take 150, multiply by 0.65, it's got about 100 milligrams of metragenine in the product. And so that entire packet would now be, we've revamped our packaging. This wasn't when you were consuming it. That wasn't what was on there. It said 3 servings, no easy way to map it out, nothing at all. The package a guy held up, we do metered servings now, child-proof, tamper-resistant lids, QR codes that we'll post a link somewhere. We actually are going so far, Nate and David, on transparency, that we have a 24/7, 365 live video feed into our production facility. You can see where we make this stuff. You can see the certificate of analysis on every test we've ever ran on every product, all the way through to when the FDA does mock inspections, to when the Department of Agriculture comes in. We're posting everything because we want everybody to see what we're up to, because we think it's more healthy. So I share all this with 2 years ago, Nate, I would have told you something completely different because we didn't have the science that supported it. And the science takes way longer than the aggressive scientists can figure out how to alter the chemical profile. So now we're in this horrible catch-22 where, just like you said, I did speak to, and he said it was okay that I share his story on the show. I spoke to Caleb, right? And it felt horrible that his journey started with consuming a handful of MIT-45 based gummies down in Houston. And like that eventually led over a 9-month period to getting into 7-hydroxy and saying like, holy shit, like what's happening now is you go into a smoke shop, they don't have your favorite brand, or you're asking what's a better product, or I've tried this, what else should I try? And the smoke shop people, oh, so this is the best product, this is the best Kratom. And you pick it up and it says 7-hydroxy, and you're like, what the hell is this? Oh, it's just the most pure form of Kratom. Because they don't know, then they're misinforming. Then you try it once or twice and you are hooked. There's no other way to say it. And so that's what I'm seeing going on. And I'd love to have the conversation of all the ifs. I know there's a lot, that was a diatribe for a long period of time. I don't think people should consume 7-hydroxy. I don't think most people should consume Kratom consistently. I think
they even sell in gas stations down here too now. It's like the Indians like pushing the gas stations. They don't know, but they're making money off it. You know what I mean?
Tons of money. Yeah. There was I just got a link this morning that 2 people robbed a smoke shop and then went to the gas station to take all the 7-hydroxy, all the things from this, and they only took 7-hydroxy. Like this is turning into the next fentanyl inside the US. Like that's what this is becoming. And it's a scary fucking place to get to, because Kratom by itself has been around. First data consumption is 1880. Right. People in Thailand and Indonesia aren't scratching their neck and like climbing trees to take off leaves. And I'm being facetious with that, but like if consumed appropriately, under mild to moderate servings, it has a lot of benefits, right, Nate? One of the things I think for the fitness world, because of the digestive enzymes inside of Kratom, there's 3 specific digestive enzymes, and because of the molecular weight of the Kratom molecule, there's a lot of additional benefit. If you were to take a trace amount prior to your pre-workout, it's going to increase vasodilation, it's going to increase blood flow, not because Kratom did it, but because it made your pre-workout more bioavailable. Same thing is going to happen with your potential sleep aid. The downside to that, it's the same pathway for alcohol. It's the same pathway for opioids. It's the same digestive enzyme. So you take 25 milligrams of Kratom and then you go have a glass of wine or 2 shots and you feel like you've had a bottle or 12 shots. Yeah. You take, if you're someone that has struggled with addiction before, and you take your whatever the substances of choice, and then you add Kratom to it, it's like dumping rocket fuel on something. It's a scary place to be. So again, forgive me for the diatribe. I'm really passionate about this stuff of how do you get the information out? How do you share it with people? I mean, we put warnings, we've got contraindication warnings in our boxes. Like I want everybody to know, do this responsibly.
Would you say though, like when you say like, okay, the suggested dose would be like 25 or
serving.
Yeah, serving. See, the thing that I find is worrisome too is I feel like there's a tolerance that's built up, you know what I mean, can be built up fairly easy if someone's using it every day. So that's sort of what worries me too, because I think a lot of people, like I said, in prep, let's say they're taking the 25 the first time. Yeah, that's awesome. That's how I felt. And then I started using more because it wasn't really getting the same effect, you know what I'm saying? But I was also using it daily. So
well, I think there's some back and forth with that. Like as we look at, I mean, I'm no stranger to anabolics, right? The first 5 times I took a shot of testosterone, I'm like, man, this is awesome. It's rocket fuel. I can run through a wall. First time I took some shots of Tren, like this is magic. Right. And then it's not upping the dose and doing more or taking more shots more frequently. You just kind of realize the fact of no, this is just how I feel now. This is there. You're not chasing that next level. You're not, and that's like, how do we weave that into the conversation? Because I agree, those mu opioid receptors, that is the opioid receptor. So you have a slight antagonist from mitragynine, where almost a complete bonding through 7-hydroxy. Like they're different mechanisms, same pathway, slightly different action in the body. And you're right, there is a tolerance that gets built up. But it's, can you be self-aware enough? That's why we believe 25 milligrams, no more than 25 milligrams, no more than once every 6 hours, is what I deem to be safe. Now, safe from the FDA standpoint and safe from my standpoint are very, very different. If you wanted to overdose, I hate that word, but if you want to reach a saturation level inside the body of mitragynine, you'd have to consume 56 bottles of MIT 45 gold inside of 10 minutes without vomiting.
Yeah.
To potentially have, well, that's like, sure, if you could also chug a keg of beer inside of 20 minutes, you also might have a level of things that would be uncomfortable for you. It's just not realistic. So
see, Nate, for me, when I started taking Kratom, I was having issues with my shoulder, and I saw that it helped me with my workouts, and my pain tolerance was a lot lower. Now I've tried, because I wanted to understand some of the things that you were saying when you stopped taking it, how you would feel. And for somebody like me, and we've talked about, I don't have an addictive personality. I've taken Kratom for 6 months, 8 months, almost every day, but sometimes twice a day. Stopped taking it for 2 weeks. I had no cold sweats, no problem sleeping, no jonesing for it. The only thing I noticed, my shoulders and my back hurt more than they did when I took it. So and I think when, the people that end up quote unquote abusing it and, chasing a higher dose or a higher serving or that feeling, that becomes a problem. And I tell everybody, my analogy to using Kratom is no different than people that use stim pre-workouts. You use the stim pre-workout when you need it, when you're tired, when you go to the gym, if you need a little boost. And when you take a pump product every day, that's more beneficial. So I tell people, utilize Kratom as needed basis. You don't have to take it every day. There's no need to take it every day. The problem is instead of taking it for the intention, people take it a lot just to get a certain feeling, and then they chase that feeling throughout every day, and then that becomes the problem. And which is where the educational part becomes very important, which is why conversations like this, where you're telling us the bad and and the negative, and then there's good for from what Ryan said, my experiences from it. And I think it's important, because when I first started the company, my number one goal was to educate people on taking it. I just didn't want to start a product, throw it out there, and tell everybody to take it because Guy said so. That's not what I wanted to do. I found a benefit for me, because I've said it to Nate, I said it to David. It gave me 3 years of my bodybuilding career. If it wasn't for utilizing Kratom and finding a serving that worked for me, to allow me to do things, my shoulders were so bad, I would have retired in 2018. I was done. Double shoulder surgery. I was shot, couldn't train the right way, but I found something. And I, as Ryan said, I called it my pre-pre. I would take a serving before I left my house. I would go to the gym, take my pre-workout, and the combination of the two allowed me to train to the level and intensity that I needed without being in agony. So for me, that's where I saw the benefit from it. But I know, David, you haven't spoken that much because I didn't come to you yet, but I know your background is very knowledgeable in many areas. So I know we had over an hour conversation on the phone, and we went 8,000 different directions. And I want you to give me some background of your your knowledge in general, your background, your education. But I also want to hear, because you even said there is a place for Kratom, but the problem is not the Kratom, it's the information that's out there and not out there.
A little bit of both. So
Yeah.
I'll give a brief background. Actually, my father's in the clothing industry. He owns a really big clothing show called the Cobb Galleria Show.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So my father owns that show.
Nice.
So grew up around it. I dress like I'm homeless all the time. My father's probably a little bit disappointed in that, but bodybuilding kind of ruined my job at being able to wear nice clothing for a bit. So
that's why I had guys like Ryan to make
yeah, exactly.
for the bodybuilders.
Yeah, I could have used him a while ago. And now I'm small again. So So a little bit of background on me. My degree was actually in IT. Big data analysis was my background. My first job out of school was corporate Coca-Cola. I was natural in bodybuilding for a little while. I didn't even know steroids were around. I thought it was something that Barry Bonds took and stuff like that, and that was about it. I got introduced to it. My first cycle was actually Tren, ironically enough, because that was what everyone took that was in magazines. Terrible choice. Highly don't recommend, but I felt like a god for a bit there. The god complex is a very real thing, and it's not a good thing, by the way. So I was good that I was level-headed, and I was definitely single at the time, so that was good. I kept my distance from everyone. Then when it kind of got into that realm, it's like, all right, well, what am I putting in my body? Getting into the pharmacokinetics behind it. I taught myself the endocrine system really backwards. I'm very, very simple-minded in the sense where I'm very deep on mathematics and science, very, very deep on it. And then you ask me to spell something, and I'm known for like my written post, and you can pick up on a spelling error. Thank God that Steve Jobs didn't fix spell correct and stuff like that and grammar correct, because they're always incorrect. So that being said, is kind of going forward, I taught myself pharmacokinetics around steroids, and then I kind of got into, okay, well, I have ADHD and probably pretty deep in the spectrum to a certain extent. I'm not going to say anything about that, but you guys can piece that one together. And I needed to know what I was doing, how to make things better. And the only reason why I'm still even in the bodybuilding community is because I do believe that there are better ways to do things. I believe that you can stay relatively healthy in it. And I don't believe that there is a safe steroid model. I believe that there are intelligent things you can do to counteract some side effects to hopefully not shave as many years off your life. And that's the truth behind it. So I got severe gastrointestinal issues. I had to start teaching myself functional health and really dive down that rabbit hole after 6 times of being told I had IBS, and that's not fixing anything. So basically fixed my gut over time. I had a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and candida overgrowth for about a decade. Fixed that, nipped in the butt, took about 2 years to completely correct it. And then it kind of jumped into the medical side of it, where I started studying under a urologist who was a genius. And one of my best friends is one of the best doctors in the world. And we nerd out all the time. I just went out there for a podcast recently. That's Dr. Kyle Gillette. And I wanted to just know to keep my friends healthy, to keep my loved ones healthy. That was the whole point to this rabbit hole. And I've probably seen 5,000 to 10,000 panels of labs by this point. I'm getting more into the scanning realm of like, how can you prevent plaque buildup so that you don't have an aneurysm and things like that to keep people alive. I turned out that I'm glad I stopped bodybuilding in like my late 20s, because I have a factor 5 mutation. People don't really know what that is. That's a clotting mutation. And that's what my mentor, John Meadows, passed away from, was an autoimmune disease where it led to an embolism, pulmonary embolism. And I actually have to get my lungs scanned here soon. So that being said, that was my rabbit hole into the medical world. Now, I do read scientific studies. That's what I do. That's the only thing that I actually read literature-wise, is I read medical literature nonstop. That's what I enjoy. I don't really like reading books. I've read the anabolic Wikipedia, basically, which I think we all have that are interested in the subject. And you have to read in between the lines when it comes to it, for sure. Now, coming into kind of the addiction part of it, my family, I have an addictive family. Not all of them, but most. One of them was heroin. So I'm very well aware of how it can disrupt it. They've been sober for almost a decade now, I believe.
That's awesome.
And yes, so like I'm very, very well aware of like Nate, and like it's anything. It's literally anything. You have to treat it like a disease, unfortunately. Yeah. And when I went to college, actually what drove me into bodybuilding I call it my anti-drug. It was my drug. It was my addiction, was bodybuilding, because I needed something to numb out. My parents got divorced, and my best friend took his life a month after that. And I went and it was the first time that I actually like went to have to feel something, and I went emotionally constipated, and I like literally took all my time and energy in the gym to numb myself out physically, so I couldn't feel my emotions. Eventually had to teach myself how to feel again. And this is a process that a lot of bodybuilders in the fitness space do not go through, is learning how to get over trauma, learning how to get over PTSD. Almost all of us have PTSD of some sort, whether it's from early childhood or later on. If you're going to the gym and you're putting a bar on your back and you're going until you feel like, if I can't stand up anymore, I deserve to die right now. If you can't get to that spot, first off, you're not going to be a successful bodybuilder. And then 2, you're literally not getting over what you need to get over. You're using it as a crutch, just like a drug. And then these people that are addicted to the gym, they start getting hooked onto steroids. They start getting hooked onto other things. And the rabbit hole of Kratom, and by the way, I am someone that microdoses, or I haven't really microdosed in a while, but I've microdosed LSD, I microdosed mushrooms, I've microdosed Kratom, I microdosed ketamine. I've done it all because I need to understand and I want to biohack my brain because of how I process information, and usually I need to slow it down. So that being said, Kratom, I didn't like Kratom. My last bodybuilding show was literally for nootropic experiments to see what worked. Kratom was one of them. C-Max and Selenk was another. LSD was one, and microdosing. Microdosing was always kind of my tried and true for microdosing psilocybin. So I did always do good with mushrooms. Now, step forward, I ended up getting diagnosed with Graves' disease, which is hyperthyroidism. So adrenaline pumps out, and most microdoses would just send me to the moon. It would be too much energy from the stimulatory effects on the dopamine, because most of them are dopamine agonists to some certain second or drive it up. So taking a step into Kratom, and why I do not like Kratom, and personally, not only just my personal experience, what I've seen in labs and what I've seen on the habit forming side, not just 7-OH. So I work with very high up bodybuilders, like for the functional and health side of things. Prolactin is a major issue, and I'm going to get into that rabbit hole in a second, which you'll appreciate the science that I'm going to dive into, because Ryan, I'm going to challenge you a lot here.
Yep. And
yes, it works on the mu opioid receptor as an agonist and an antagonist simultaneously. So that's good and bad. I like antagonists at the opioid receptor site, which there's better drugs for it than Kratom, in my personal opinion, like naltrexone, for instance. Low dose naltrexone is a miracle drug, in my personal opinion. So Kratom is habit forming on two different fronts, in the sense that you have someone that is susceptible to addiction. Then you have a substance that is driving up dopamine when you take it. It's giving that stimulatory factor. So every time that you don't take it, you don't get that stimulation. And if you're doing it as a habit forming, where you're taking it before the gym to numb yourself out to get a better workout, well, now what happens if you don't have it for a day? Well, something's missing. I didn't get a good workout. I'm going back to Kratom again. That could be caffeine as well. I'm not saying it can't be. Caffeine is a drug. It's not a supplement. It's a drug. So Kratom is in the same category as that. The issue that I have with it is it's on the opioid receptor. So that makes it more prone to being habit forming and addictive forming. On top of that, when you get that dopamine drive up, well, now you have this back end of the negative feedback loop, and you're getting the inhibition of prolactin. So when you start to inhibit prolactin, now you get the return effects, the loop effect of prolactin levels are starting to get driven up. When prolactin levels get driven up, and you're talking about someone that's on trend, that's probably already somewhat maybe suicidal, right? Like, I mean, we've had suicides in the bodybuilding community, and a lot of them are not talked about, by the way. Like, I just want to, like, big name bodybuilders have been talked about. Other ones are not. Like, they just gone with the wind. So
I know some of them.
It's very low key. It's a hush hush subject, and I'm just talking about it because we're here. So tren will drive up gene transcription to rise prolactin. Then you have a drug like Kratom in the mix, and I have seen it where cabergoline will not drive the prolactin down from the Kratom. We even tried letrozole to try to resolve estrogen and bring down prolactin. We tried caber in conjunction with it. Nothing touched it. It was fascinating. And I do have more than one case study on this. So when you're taking someone who has addictive personalities, you're affecting your dopamine, you're also now affecting your prolactin. So one, your sex drive is probably nil and void, which doesn't really matter in a prep anyways. You feel like a Ken doll because you're so depleted down. But when prolactin levels get driven up, you start to get aggressive. Let's just say you start crying during Disney movies, and you're not sure why you're crying during a Disney movie. Like Wall-E, you probably made me cry without trend, but that's okay. The prolactin is what we really attribute a lot of roid rage to. Not only that, but when you have steroids in conjunction, and now you're metabolizing at a genetic level, when androgens are involved, you start to metabolize adrenaline faster, meaning that you drive your car faster, you walk faster, you feel more aggressive. Well, you want more dopamine hit. So if your Kratom's your drug right now, you're going to lean into Kratom. It doesn't matter if you're saying, like, on little thing on the bottom of the label, right? How many people are going to read that? 70H. I don't even care if it's 70H or not. I'm glad that you guys are actually being transparent. But when it comes to education, it's not directly from the business. The business usually cannot talk about it because the medical claims cannot be made. I'm very well aware of that. On an education platform where it's education purposes, the world is your oyster. You can talk about whatever you want, freedom of speech. Now, you may be suppressed, but at the end of the day, who cares? At least you're helping a person out there. So that's kind of my stance with Kratom is I think that there are a lot of better options for most people. Kratom is not for everyone, but from when it comes to helping with pain, there may be better options too. Now, some people will have great results with it with non-addictive personalities. The question is, do they start having habit forming happen from it because the dopamine and that hit? It's kind of like suppressing dopamine from using a GLP-1 agonist. And now all of a sudden you're off of it and now you're getting fat because you're eating too much food. It's the same thing. Everything has a catch-22 behind it. It's just making people aware that anything you do in life, if you're not getting dopamine from it, you're going to go to something else.
I love it, David. I mean, to me, nothing that you're sharing is I'll say challenging to me. It's sound scientifically. I agree with every aspect of it. The challenge to me in any study that we do is number one, how large is N, right? How many people is meaningful? And then how many of those people, and that's not just Kratom, that's generally in life. You read a study and N is 6, and I'm like, who the hell cares about N being 6? Like, we can all bullshit 6 people. Like, there's a way around that, which is challenging with a company like Mid45 even funding studies, because I make people sign essentially a waiver of liability that no matter what they come up with, good or bad, it has to be promoted. It has to be shared. There's no suppression inside of our world. But in saying that, I mean, this zooms out a whole nother level to the necessity of dopamine that we have as human beings right now as a society. Which again, I'm not trying to take the conversation and move it away from Kratom. But look at social media, look at technology, look at cell phones, look at all these things that we are all driving towards, and then the feel good nature of dopamine, and then the habit. I love that you brought up the mental aspect of why we get into bodybuilding or anything. Like, we're all trying to solve something from a different point in life, or a story we've told ourselves, or some wiring that has happened. And it's challenging where we have a study where I think N was 22, so not significant enough. It's not bad, but it's not great. That shows if your C-reactive protein isn't fully expressed, you have 3 times as much propensity for habit-forming natures of consuming kratom and other product. And so what that led us to start to try to buy a DNA company, because I'm like, fuck this. If this is real, I want you to have to spit in a tube before you can buy kratom. And if it turns green, you can buy it. If it turns red, you can't. Because I'm like, now we're putting our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
Now N is only 17 or 22 or whatever it was. I don't remember. I'll make sure we post the study. It's nothing that is proprietary, but it's saying, where is it when you know better that you do better? And then how do you actually do better? Because I agree, David, we've taken the Kratom Research Institute. It took so long for me to get our legal team to sign off on the fact of my First Amendment rights is to share what I want to share. I want to have a platform that all Kratom information, that if anybody want to know about Kratom, I would love for you to contribute. I would love for Nate to contribute his story. If you have a story, if you have information, if there's something, it should be in one place that you can see. For every positive, you can backlink to a negative, so you can sit there and say, well, which one do I want to believe in? At least you had all of it in one fucking spot. Because right now, you cruise Reddit and it's either, it saved my life, it's the best thing ever, or it's killing people. It's the devil's work. There is no actual in between that we can find, and we want to bring that in between to the conversation. And so I agree with all that. I'm sorry as well. I think I said antagonist versus agonist during an early part of the conversation, and I want to make sure I'm saying that the right way. I actually view, mitragynine as an agonist, a partial agonist, and then 7-hydroxy is really a full agonist. Like it is. There's no question on what that's doing to mu opioid receptor. And I also think it's important to let people know just across the board that the bonding to the mu opioid receptor inside of something like 7-hydroxy is 46 times greater than mitragynine and 13 times greater than morphine. And so it's like, even inside the plant itself, when I first got in the industry, there were 48 alkaloids, subalkaloids, and metabolites, and now we found 52. It's like, we don't even know what the hell is all the way in the plant yet, let alone how they all work together. Like, what if we take this one out? What if we add something? And so David, thank you for sharing. I agree. Like I said, to me, this is one of those things of you're spot on. And that's where it's like, how do you help someone? Like, I would also make the argument a lot of people shouldn't be slamming caffeine all the time. Not to alter it. Not to, again, this is always where it gets challenging. When I bring this up in conversation, people are like, you're comparing it to no. Like, I'm agreeing with the Kratom statement. Pause, stop, 3 deep breaths. Then let's look at other places where we're also addicted to the dopamine flywheel and the negative feedback loop that's happening. And like, it's a big conversation for society as a whole, that how do we pull back from that? How do we get more intentional? How do we breathe more? How do we spend more time in nature? How do we spend more time grounding? How do we get back to natural food sources? How do we, like, this is a huge conversation to get into.
I think the problem is too, we're dealing with the bodybuilding world within us.
Yes.
So we're very extremist, right? So you could take an older person and probably Kratom would be fucking life-saving for them, where they're like, in pain all the time, arthritis, blah, blah, blah. And they could probably control that. We're bodybuilders, we're fucked up. You know what I mean? So we're always pushing things to the limit, like we're talking about. We're very extreme. We're gonna justify in our head. That's the problem, is like a lot of stuff is in our head. It's easy to say, oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can manage this. I'm a bodybuilder, I'm tough.
I can't get then this Kratom won't do it. Like I can stop and do what I want whenever I want because I'm a man.
We have that machoism in our heads as bodybuilders, right? We're very tough alpha guys, you know what I mean? So it's very easy to justify in our heads. And I just think, for me personally, I just think if more people, like the discussion we're having now, you know what I mean? We're being real honest and open, and you guys are going right with it. You know what I mean? If you're not like bashing us and we're all meeting in the middle. And I think the problem is, like I said, I'm not going to read the study. I'm going to believe the athlete. So my favorite athlete, if he's saying, hey, this isn't a problem, I think that's what I'm just speaking for the majority, that most of these guys, these younger bodybuilders, maybe 19, 20, they hear one of the best bodybuilders in the world say, hey, this isn't, problem, blah, blah, blah. And I think, honestly, some of the athletes are a little bit hooked on it and they don't know it, or they don't want to believe it, or they don't want to admit it. Because I just know some people personally, and I know, what I'm just saying. I'm not going to, you know what I mean? But
yeah, I got you.
I think are struggling, maybe, that don't want to come forward or admit it. You know what I mean? So it's easy to justify it. And obviously, if you're sponsored by them, you're not going to talk badly about it. So I think that's the problem, is like the word of mouth is, you're going to believe the athlete over doing the research. These kids aren't going to go research and read these forums. They're going to say, oh, well, this guy just said it's great to take. Okay.
Well, Nate, I don't know. I don't think Ryan touched on this, but Ryan can attest to this. When we had, we have less athletes now, but with all the athletes we've had, Ryan has held actually more than one Zoom meeting with all the athletes on it, answering questions, giving educational background. So we're not just paying athletes to say, I took this. We actually have Zoom calls where all the athletes are on it. It's an open forum. They ask question. Ryan gives them educational information, studies done, analytics on it. So does every company do that with anything, whether it's a pre-workout, a supplement company, or a Kratom company? I think that every company should be educating what their athletes are taking and explaining it correctly. Now, there's multiple Kratom companies out there, and there's also multiple Kratom companies within the fitness vertical. I can't say that they all do that, but as far as doing the right thing, we do, at least in my opinion, what I feel is right by the athlete and the end consumer, by at least trying to get as much information out there as possible. And Ryan does a great job with it as well. And I want Ryan to touch on, because we haven't really mentioned it yet. Ryan, can you touch on the AK and the KCPA and kind of explain, or is that something we can talk about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, just so I say it openly, there's absolutely nothing I won't talk about. So we can throw anything out there.
And and you've also been talking with somebody
a little bit higher up.
I don't know if I don't want to say that either, unless you can, but
I'll share some pieces and parts that seem to be appropriate. Okay. So to start with, we have to look at something called the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, the KCPA. And the KCPA, when it was originally enacted, it was actually Utah was the first state. Or for those of you that don't know, Utah ends up being kind of the forefront of almost all supplement manufacturing regulation. Orrin Hatch was from there, the senator that then championed the DSHEA Act. And that the Shea Act is kind of what created the regulatory framework for supplementation, dietary supplements and dietary ingredients. And whether that's good or bad is a little yet to be seen. I think 1994 was a much different time than 2025.
Just
And
tell people what the DSHEA Act is, because I guarantee 95% of people on here won't understand what the DSHEA Act is.
of course, so the Shea Act, essentially the most watered down version, says that if you can prove that a dietary ingredient was in commerce prior to, I think it's October 11th, 1994, that it gets grandfathered in without having to go through the new dietary ingredient classification. You can make structure and functional claims. It was a way to have the intention behind it were very, very good. The DSHEA was meant to keep nutritional supplements in commerce and not allow pharmaceutical companies to put a stronghold on it to drive up price. Like the intention in 94 was spot on. It's a really different world 30 years later, right? Like I think we can all agree to that.
Yeah.
And so Utah was the first state to enact the KCPA, the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, which at that point, we as an industry, we were pushing it to be almost deemed a food. We thought the food classification was going to be better for the industry versus supplementation. That becomes important because as you look at the 14 different states that have a version of the KCPA in place, it's not the same in a per state basis. So this is where this gets a little more challenging. The Kratom Consumer Protection Act basically states you need to have a GMP compliant manufacturing facility. Well, kind of no shit. Like I think everybody should. There's a lot of companies that don't. There's a lot of nutritional supplements. You go in your normal supplement retailer and the shit on their shelf is not GMP compliant or certified. That's a whole nother conversation for another time. I know that is table stakes to me. If you don't have a clean environment with documented protocols and procedures, I can't imagine how you could wake up and feel good about yourself selling product. Just full stop.
Yeah.
But you have to have a GMP compliant facility. Need to have, at that point, it's either 18 and over or 21 and over, depending on the state, clearly labeled on your bottle or your package. You need to have legible font. Now, legible font gets really interesting because depending on the size of the package, you can play around with that. Like it's a 4.2 font or a 3.75 font. I'm like, nobody is reading 3 points. Like there's all like, okay, so you pass, but do you really pass? Like, what does that mean? The KCPA also, way back when it first came out, it had 7-hydroxy needing to be 2% or under by label claim. And I think that is an atrocity. And I've been vocal with that inside of the American Kratom Association as well as federally. I think that there is no scientific basis for that being there. And I think that allows companies to spike their product if they so choose to increase the amount of opioid interactions and inevitably have it be that you might want to consume more of the product. There are companies right now that are very, very well known, some of the largest in the space, that when you look at their label, it shows that they are 2.25% 7-hydroxy by volume in a full spectrum kratom product, which does not happen naturally. It's like, to me, natural leaf, I'll make the argument over and over and over again. Natural leaf, if you're unfamiliar, there are 3 strains, which are no different than 3 colors of leaves that fall off trees when it really comes down to it: red, green, and white. Well, scientifically, is they all metabolize the same way. They all have the same mechanism of action. Some will say that one gives you energy. Some will say that I can't find any science. We can't find any study. We can't get any test to validate that. But that's anecdotally.
Yeah.
In sharing that, the difference becomes different colors have different amounts of various substances in them, right? I'll say your green vein might have 1% metragenine by volume, and your white vein might have 1.25 metragenine by. So they're just a slightly different chemical compound. I share all that because, again, when you look at raw leaf material, it's been around for years. I think it's safe. I don't think it's incredibly harmful to people if consumed appropriately or under some level of supervision. I think that the reason I share that is because the FDA actually allows a 20% variance on your label for a naturally occurring product. So I can put that it has 1%, and if it tests at 1.2%, I'm still safe. I've still protected the consumer. I think that's bullshit personally. I get why. Go ahead, Nate.
I thought it was 10% because that's like one standard
No,
deviation.
it's 20 because I talk about if it fits your macros out all the time. And when people look at labels and they look at calories, that there could be a 20% differential high or low.
So is that a difference between a supplement and food? Okay, interesting.
Oh,
Okay.
mate. Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
there's supplement food and different between naturally occurring and synthesized, right? There's a couple different interpretations. You're spot on. I would say the minute we get into a more traditional dietary supplement, dietary ingredient classification, it does drop to 10, which is why we're pushing for that, because I think it's better for people overall. That's where I get into extracts being a more pure and consistent form, because you can control that variance. Our variances are inside of 3% always because we're able to do so. The downside for that is, depending on the extraction process, you could have residual solvents. That's a whole nother thing that gets into it. We figured out a proprietary way to produce our product that is almost 100% water-based extraction. Almost. We use one small trace amount of a food grade, um, a food grade chemical that allows us to extract it. We can have a whole nother conversation offline. Those are some of the trade secrets we keep internally. But in sharing that, the KCPA was very well intended, but needs updated. And the updating is not going to happen state by state. It's too late. That genie's out of the bottle. Because to me, we need to get into what are the label claims really supposed to be, right? What is the tolerance that we as an industry want? I value the FDA. I value the government for what they do and what they don't do. Fuck that. It has to be what we know is best for a consumer. I don't care that the government says you can have a 20% variance. Let's hold the standard to 5%.
Yep.
Let's pull some things in and be the one that other industries want to emulate, not be the ones that just barely paint inside the fucking lines. That drives me crazy. I think we can do better. I think across the board, then that leads into some interesting conversations I've had with some of the new administration. I was fortunate to speak to some of the team before they get into office. I'll say I've spoken to some of the individuals that might have ran for president that decided not to run for president, will be the best way to say it.
That's why I didn't want to say anything before.
Between the lines, I actually get a chance to go to DC here in about a week to spend some time on Capitol Hill working through these issues with the head of the CDC, with the head of Health and Human Services, with the head of the FDA. Not because I know better. This has nothing to do with MIT 45. Like, guys, if we jump in a time machine and we go back 18 months and you look at our old packaging, everything that I'm saying we would have fallen short on. We didn't have standard servings. We didn't have childproof and tamper-evident lids. We didn't have metered servings. We didn't have 4.5 font on bottles. We didn't have QR codes that led to every certificate of an out. Like, we didn't have those things. So this is not throwing rocks from a glass house. It's saying we did it. It's cost us a shitload more money. Like this is not helping our bottom line in any way, shape, or form. But to me, it's helping a novice consumer and it's helping progress the industry forward. And I think so much so that inside the AKA, I have offered every one of our counterparts the ability to buy the droppers from us, to walk them through the science and the math of how to do it, to give it to them at cost. We actually have our own injection molding in-house now, so we can make our own droppers. And like, I just want the industry to level up, because I don't want conversations like we're having now that are negative. Like and not that it's a negative conversation. I love the conversation, but I want it to be that if we could, as an industry, no different than alcohol. I don't love the comparison, but if you drink a 20 proof vodka or 80 proof vodka, the proof is the standardization. It allows you to, as a consumer, say, I kind of understand what I'm getting into. We have to
I want to defend what you're saying really fast, because I'm going to use the medical industry really fast. So there's usually a 5%, I think it's 5% in medication, right? And usually they try for like within 99% if they can, but it's 5%, and that's like generic essentially. So there was a big pharma that was busted 3 times in 1 year, and I think they eventually shut it down for having fentanyl in their ADHD medicine, because obviously most of the raw is coming from China. So I just want to defend you guys really fast for like 1 second. A lot of people don't realize that the medical industry is also taking heat right now. Compounding pharmacies are not all the same, just like manufacturing of products and supplements are not all the same. So going above and beyond and try to get something within 3% is almost impossible. Well, not impossible. It is doable. It's a very expensive process, because also the batch testing has to be so frequent to make sure. And then also on top of that, you don't trust your own factories and probably need a third-party test to happen to confirm what's going on. And that's the process that everyone should be taking. And the supplement industry, like, they were putting steroids in products. Like, it was craze was on GNC shelves. We had amphetamine on GNC shelves. We had steroids on GNC shelves. We had pro hormones that were Superdrol on GNC shelves. So I like the FDA is great, actually, which people don't want to believe that because obviously payoffs happen all the time to get things pushed through faster or whatever it is. But I won't go in. That's a rabbit hole. So I just want to like add some clarification for everyone that it's not one industry. It is all the industries that need to get better, and people that are in actually house trying to make it better make a difference. So, okay, I'm done talking.
Oh, no, David, I love you bring that up because let's just share. I'll just share what we do, right? And we're always trying to get better. Every individual component, our extract, what goes into our finished good, what goes into our bottle, it only has 4 things in it: vegetable glycerin, citric acid, reverse osmosis water, and our extract. That's it. All of those independent components come from verified sources that are all food grade. They have to test. They're supposed to test. They give us a test before they send us a certificate of analysis of what they're sending us. It lands inside of our door. It gets quarantined. It gets scooped out and tested at a third party. We don't test our own because you can bullshit the test. We send it out to Cambria Analytics. They do all the testing. It's a 10-day window. So no matter how fast you do it, you have to overnight them samples. You have to let it culture. You have to get the results back. So you have cash tied up for 10 days at minimum on water, citric acid, and vegetable glycerin. In doing so, then as we go into production, they get blended together, assuming all the thumbs up happen, right? Everything's clear, everything's good. Those thumbs up happen. We are in a ISO 7 compliant facility. We could get a 6, but we don't really need it for what we do. If you're not familiar with what that means, it's basically reverse pressure rooms. It's as sterile as something could be that doesn't make a level of pharmaceutical type products or medical devices. The traditional supplement company, if you really push, you can get away with ISO 9. So we're 2 levels more stringent than that on what we do. That's neither here nor there, just the type of pride we take in our facility. There still could be contaminants that get entered in somehow, some way. I mean, we clean everything relentlessly, but once the products get blended, they get quarantined again. They get retested again because who knows what could have happened. Now that some of it's self-preserving because once it goes into a bottle, we have a lot more expense associated with that. So it's not just watching out for consumers, it's watching out for us as well. Things get blended, they get sent out for testing, the test comes back, the test's good. Now we can put into finished goods. We are grabbing 20 controlled units every hour from our production line and sending them out for independent testing as well as stability testing. We do this nonstop all the time, every time we run a line, because we produce our own product in-house. We're not using a third party. We're not using a co-packer or co-manufacturer. It's massively more expensive. Now we've wanted to alter that, David, and we're starting to, all this is done externally. We are bringing a part of this internal because I want to get some of the quick wins. So before we send something out, like if there's contaminants, I want to test for that right away. There's no need, like let's just full stop if there's something there that's not inside of scope. If for some reason the metragine levels are too high or too low, let's just go ahead and get that taken care of. But these are all things that are so far above and beyond what is required from a supplement company. A supplement company across the board, if you're not familiar with this, that because somebody sent me a certificate of analysis, I don't have to test it. I actually take more liability when I test it internally. I could just run their C of A and say, okay, it was tested. It's the same lot code. It's the same batch number. We're good. I then can put in a product. I only have to test one product from every lot to say that it was safe. And for lack of a better term, if I have certificate of analysis on 20 different things that I blend together, I could have one lot for the entire fucking year and only run one test and be compliant. Now, it's not safe in case there's recalls. It's not safe for human beings. Our testing expenses on a monthly basis are 6 figures every month, like clockwork. So that's a challenge to me is I know what we're doing in a gray space as clean as we know how to do it right now, because it's still a gray space and we want information out. But it's one of those things that's why I have video cameras literally all through our facility, give you the domain, log on, you will see everything we're doing all the time. I think you should be able to see how we're doing this, why we're doing this. You're going to see like, oh, you dropped something. Well, some shit happens, but you drop it, it should be thrown away. It should be disregarded. It's instantly quarantined. Like there's all these things we do that I didn't know any of this existed, right? You think of what it is to be a normal consumer. There's a chance as you're listening, like, what is this guy even blabbing about? Who cares? Because most of the time it doesn't matter. It's where the FDA has such a challenging spot, and I didn't know this either. For a nutritional supplement, for something that's on the shelf at GNC, Vitamin Shop, Whole Foods, the onus of responsibility of proving safety actually starts with the manufacturer. It doesn't start with the FDA. And safety can be from one of two ways. It can be in vitro studies that just say it's quote unquote safe, or if a large enough subset of people consume the product without adverse stated effects, that is also deemed to be safe. So you can run some really bullshit cell studies that you can accelerate inside of 3 weeks, say, well, that's safe enough, or you can combine enough pre-tested safe products, and because they all were safe, you don't have to test your own product. You can launch it to market. If 5,000 people buy the product and didn't say I got sick from it, it's safe. And until there's a negative adverse effect that the FDA is aware of, they don't have to do anything. There's no full circle moment here. It's like, oh, well, it's safe. It's on GNC's shelf. Of course, it's got to be safe. It wasn't tested for anabolics. It wasn't tested for SARMs. It wasn't tested for because it didn't need to be because it met the onus of responsibility of safety. And it's like, how do you even fix that?
See, and Dave, and that's why when people clump kratom into this big space together, it's where it becomes challenging because I feel as an owner of a company as Ryan does that we do set the bar high and our standards are higher. And I think when it comes to when we speak about kratom and our kratom products, I think we're a cut above the rest, to be honest with you. Because we're doing things that most companies aren't that should be. And that's why Ryan is progressing and trying to get a lot of these things done because we don't want to have the negative conversations like we're having about the products. And it's a hard fought battle. It's uphill and Ryan fights it every day.
So I just want to ask a few questions around like what you're trying to do as far as regulations go, timelines, things
I'm
like
just taking
that.
a piss real quick.
Okay, cool. I'm going to have to do the same thing here in a second. But as far as timelines go and stuff like that. So knowing that there is that addictive property, no matter what you do, it's addiction to it because of how the mechanism of action behind it. This is now bleeding into teens as gateway drugs. And just like marijuana used to be, and then next thing you know, there was basically a heroin epidemic because of painkillers and they put heavy regulations on painkillers. So heroin is the next thing. Same thing happened, but now it's technically kratom is the most available thing right now in the marketplace besides probably Delta 8 and 10 and 9 and whatever it is. Yep. What is the timeline for them locking down certain things as far as you can't be 18 and buy this? Things like that, I think are huge that aren't even being talked about is like teens that are gatewaying into drugs right now and getting into these addictive substances. And they don't even know enough about life and they're just getting hooked. So next thing you know, they're going down a rabbit hole and they might end up doing heroin. Why? Opioid receptor. Like that's going to be the next best thing is heroin actually.
Mm-hmm. So really impactful question, David. I'll start by saying we have not done ourselves a favor as an industry because the KCPA that's been enacted, it very clearly states 18 and over, 21 and over. The challenging part with that is there was no mechanism of action to fund the bill, so there's no money for enforcement. If we don't get our shit together as an industry and start accepting the fact there needs to be registration fees and there needs to be some level of taxation, there's no way to enforce this because we can put anything we want in law. It's easy. I mean, we all probably drove somewhere this morning or will drive somewhere this afternoon. There are laws on signs that we pass every day that state very clearly you should only drive this speed. I don't know anybody in their right mind that drives 65 on the highway when it says 65. You're playing a game. You're testing. Now, that's a very, very different way to look at it. But what some of the things that I'm championing that I believe to be best is we do need some healthy registration fees. The registration fees have to be created in such a way, though, that doesn't stop competition. Right. And that's where this is challenging. We're a 9-figure organization. We can afford registration fees. 4 years ago, when we were not a 9-figure organization, we couldn't have afforded big registration fees. So it has to be somewhere around a revenue or taxation that we got to figure out that mechanism there. Then we also need some sort of excise tax or something like that put on the product. So there's a surplus of revenue to a federal or state budget to actually enforce this. Then we need to standardize who is the enforcement agency. Inside of Utah, it's the Utah Department of Agriculture. Well, Utah Department of Agriculture, great on one side, but they get their orders from the Department of Justice, essentially. Like, there's no, like, who's going to walk into the store and actually enforce it? So now you have to figure out that part. Once you figure out those things, then it's just math, right? It's math and science to me. How many people do you need? What's the populace? How many stores can get sold in? Because the regulatory framework is there, the enforcement mechanisms aren't there. So I'm starting with the path that I'm walking down is helping clearly define what is kratom and what is not. I think everything starts that way. We talk about ban bills and 7-hydroxy. None of that's going to matter because ban bills inherently don't work because there's just another derivative. There's a lot of evidence that shows that's not necessarily the best way to do it, in my opinion. So we start by saying the FDA has already tested raw biomass. They've already sent out their studies and it's not harmful. Let's just say that that is kratom. Okay, if that is kratom, then we need some level of standardization with everything has to have a serving size on it. The serving size has to be consistent. There has to be scoopers and like we have to do the best we can. And I think it should be 21 and over. I don't think it should be 18 and over. I think it should be 100% of the time behind the register with a rear-facing door. I don't care if you're in a smoke shop that is implied 18 and over. I still think it should be reverse-facing door 21 and over. I think you should have multiple things to go through to buy the product. I think that all those things, like what's the timetable? I've been fighting this fight now for the better part of 2.5 years. This is the closest I feel like I've ever been because of the current administration's interest in transparency. And it's really an interesting conversation. Last week I was in an event and Cali Means happened to be there. And this is not a political based conversation. I think we're probably all somewhere on the same side, but just Cali Means was there and he was talking about how the federal government's really focused right now on chain of custody on food and making sure the food supplies are better. Like they're really doing a lot of things to show how to create the origin of where maybe all disease comes from and how to alter that. And by the nature of that, that's trickling over into pharmaceuticals and some of the thought processes there. Well, I had shared to start this event our completely open source model that I'm sharing with you, right? QR codes and all the C of A, all the things. Well, it started to dawn on me, we're going to put that on a blockchain and we're going to create a verification process that everything is blockchain certified because now it's above reproach. It can't be altered. Now there's a whole series of testing we'll have to go through. That led to some pretty impactful one-off conversations with Callie, and then through Callie, his sister, and then like it just kind of spun around to create some different inroads. The challenging part is, as I keep saying, the challenge, everything in this fucking industry is a challenge right now. One of the challenges, nobody cares about kratom yet. Federally, it's not on anybody's radar. It's on the radar enough at the FDA that they didn't know what it was, and that a couple of our counterparts have something out there that they shouldn't. But like we're at this unique inflection point where we need them to start caring about it. As I'm starting to understand federal politics, which I had no idea about, in order for any bill to have a chance, you got to have a couple senators actually want to champion it. The senators only want to champion if it matters to their constituents, and it only matters if they think they can win. If they can't win, like they're not going to put their horsepower behind. They're only getting 2 or 3 big at bats a year to really, really push something through. And is kratom the thing they want to push through? Is it the biggest thing? So we've got Senator Bergman from, House Representative Bergman from Michigan. We've got Mike Lee from Utah. We've got some people that are coming on board. We actually have had conversations with Bernie Sanders, other side of the aisle. I think this is a bipartisan issue. I don't think it's Republican versus Democrat. I think it's health and human services and advocacy for again, I could refer to as a novice consumer. So David, if I had my way, we would figure out how to get something done this year to at least get the first step done. The first step to me is what is kratom, what is not, and how do you enforce 21 and over a version of the KCPA that shows 1% or under 7-hydroxy, because we've just never tested a kilo of biomass that's anywhere been, so even if there's a 20% variance, and even if it's 0.7%, you're still under 1% by volume. Like there's no reason for something higher than that, which then would eliminate it would start to get rid of some of these other products for a short period of time because they wouldn't be able to be sold.
So I got a question for Ryan real quick. So since we're going off sort of like law, politics and stuff like that, how come some states it's illegal and some counties it's illegal where you can't sell kratom? How can you educate us on that a little bit?
Yeah, because there's not a blanket federal statement, you're left to state by state or county by county rules, regulations, and jurisdictions. So there's places in, I'll call it Greater Chicago, that are a couple counties there that are banning it because perhaps a smaller constituent there, you have 1 or 2 people have an adverse effect, and that then leads to that local town or city saying, no, this is banned. And so even that becomes interesting, almost kind of the inverse of cannabis. right? Where it's federally illegal, but you look at state by state, what is it, 20 states now or 22? I don't know what the cannabis laws are at this point, but it's almost inverse because there is no federal anything. It's left to kind of a Wild West side of interpretation. And so that's where this gets really challenging is if you take Caleb, lives in Indiana, traveled to Houston, consumed Kratom for the first time in Houston. That's completely legal. He didn't do anything wrong. Got back to Indiana, had no idea that Kratom was illegal in Indiana. Had no clue because never considered it before. Now all of a sudden he drives over the state line to Ohio because his children have a soccer game. He buys Kratom because it's there. He's not harming anybody. He puts it in his car, and in theory, driving back across state lines is now illegal. We're helping fund. It wasn't our product, but there's a woman in either Alabama or Mississippi, one of the two, that bought product from Georgia and drove across state lines and literally got pulled over the minute she got across state lines, and she had the bag on her front seat. And they're treating it like drug trafficking of heroin. It is the same penalty. And she had 2 bottles of some sort of extract on her front seat. And like she's facing drug trafficking charges for that. And so it's this really interesting time where it's state by state, it's county by county. I certainly would never recommend transporting product across state lines into a state where it's not legal. We don't ship to any state. We've got triple verification on IP addresses and addresses and credit card, like all the pieces. But I can't stop people from doing what they're going to do. It's a very interesting time on that side, Nate. That's a really great question.
I mean, plastic bags are illegal in Jersey. You can't go into a grocery store. There's no plastic bags. Like you can't. I got to go to PA next to my gym, and I grab a bunch of extra plastic bags there because I don't have any in Jersey. It's like when it's state by state, they can, the rules are different state by state, like anything else.
So I'm curious. So the fastest way to get things passed through at a federal level, because it's viewed as a food and not a supplement actually, is through the FDA. And then what is Kratom, right? Now the question is once you do that, at least you can walk into a facility and the FDA can walk into a facility and bust you for doing wrong practices. And that's, I think, the first step at the bare minimum. Now, how you get people, it's so such a slippery slope. Like that's the issue with it is like, it's people. Yeah. It's a drug. It should be a pharmaceutical, just like THC is kind of viewed as a pharmaceutical now in certain states. The same thing should happen with Kratom in a faster mannerism, because in 2024, I do know that the FDA put out a statement that it was dangerous and non-useful. So because the addictive properties behind it, whether that was 7-OH or not, it didn't matter because it's Kratom. And that's how consumers are always going to view Kratom, at least for now. And I don't know if consumers will ever be educated enough to know the difference between it. And that's almost an impossible battle. It's kind of like teaching people about steroids that are normal people. And like they finally removed the black box label off of testosterone this year after us knowing that it improved like triglycerides better than omega-3, right? After like decades, right? So changing public perception is very difficult. And I think that's kind of my stance on it. Like you can only do so much, but I think the first step is like, what is Kratom? So you can at least lock down poor practices. And I don't think personally it should be sold as a caffeine substitution. That's another massive misconception, because then you're going to have teens being like, oh yeah, it gives me energy. And they go in and they buy it because they're going to have someone else buy it for them anyways, right? Just like it would be alcohol and you want to drink.
Yeah, I think so much of that, David, I agree with almost all of it.
Okay.
I think one of the challenges starts to become the pharmaceutical nature versus being called something else. And I think what we're getting to as a society is there needs to be something that's not a pharmaceutical and needs to be something that's not a nutritional supplement. There needs to be a third classification, because there's this in-between space that I don't want. To me, you take a naturally occurring product that if it was just in its natural form and function, seems to have potential benefits to certain subsets of people. Now, I think you should have to be informed. I think you should have to know. I don't think you should have to go through and see the price skyrocket because of insurance companies. I think there's some unique things there, where I'm not against that, where, we started chasing that path of really wanting to go down not only an NDI, new dietary ingredient classification, but we've been working behind the scenes on a pharmaceutical indication, right? I'm agreeing with everything you're sharing. The challenge is because it is a organic substance, until you significantly alter the chemical profile to create a patentable product, there's no reason, like, you can't make money on it. And so we're going to spend 8 years and 10, 30, 40 million dollars to get through, a stage 3 trial. And like, oh, well, great. Now Kratom is this great pharmaceutical that we have no protection to ever get back our $10 million. It's just everybody, or, hundreds of millions, whatever the dollar amount would be. It's a slippery slope on that side. I agree. I think there should be more steps you have to go through.
So now that's a great question. That's a great statement. Actually, I am kind of in agreement of a new categorization. Mushrooms, for instance, phenomenal. They're using for antidepressant, PTSD, things like that. They're pretty forward thinking because there's so much data now going on with the trial groups. Same thing. There's a website where everyone's reporting, they're like a forum essentially, and they're collecting all the data. Some are controlled environments, some are just people, anecdotal evidence. LSD, same thing that's going on. They're using it for a lot. They're getting actually kind of close for ADHD and ADD instead of amphetamine use. So I would actually be on board with that. I think that's brilliant. Another thing is if you were to put the 8 years in, are you going to be a $1 trillion company if you get that first patent? I'm just saying openly, but like, and that's the way that big pharma thinks about stuff. Obviously, is it going to be worth it? Just like politicians, if they're going to try to push something through, they want to make money for their state or they want to make money for the feds. Everything is money at the end of the day. So it's business. That's what the entire world runs off of.
It is, and we're still chasing that pharmaceutical opportunity. The interesting part of that statement is I've never wanted to do something to eliminate competition. I think I like the fact that a high tide would raise all ships, and if we hold ourselves to a higher standard, where you start patenting something and you have the only inroad on one side, it's great. But then, did we starve off competition that would have benefited? I look at Elon Musk's model is the most brilliant model in the world. I mean, they're so far ahead that he open sources all of his patents essentially. Like, who cares? Go ahead and try to catch up. Like, that starts to become an interesting basis for conversation to me, where I think just like anything else, the truth is going to be somewhere in the middle. I think the best opportunity is somewhere in the middle. Just where is that middle? Where is the happy mid ground? And how many people have to invest to figure out that happy mid ground?
What you just said about Elon's kind of interesting. So you already brought up blockchain, right? So you're talking about decentralizing the entire system, which is technically, if you look at the entire software world, that's what it was a decentralized system. Linux was the beginning of everything, essentially. And then people decided to get greedy and steal the mouse and things like that. Literally, it all happened. Personal PC, you name it. So, but it created at least two parties going after it hard enough to where it progressed it. And it's technically an oligopoly. It might as well be considered a monopoly. They all work together. They're brilliant. So I think that the same thing would happen, just that there would be more money and eyes on it at the end of the day. And it would also be safer. And people are going to be pissed off that I'm saying this, because the regulations that I'm saying that need to be put in place personally would lock down a lot of opportunity coming in for small businesses, because the system's never going to be decentralized, even though it technically should. That's capitalism to a T, is decentralization. And they kind of, I mean, we already had people coming into blockchain and stuff like that are big names. So you brought it up. I'm talking to what you just said. I would love decentralized system, but I also think that centralizing to an extent does make sense.
It does, and David, only because I geek out on this stuff. I am pursuing having MIT 45 and its conglomerate be the first DAO-based organization all the way through, truly decentralized autonomous organization ran by the token holders, and have real and not just a rug pool type of utility token, but an actual security token. And we're pursuing that behind the scenes, where how different is it when the consumers of the product are helping determine where the product and where the business goes, and all types of fun pieces and parts that way. I think that is the future of society, hopefully, is to have that truly decentralized, everything's out there, everything is open source, everything allows you to make good decisions or informed decisions. You can still choose to make a bad decision. You just chose it. That's all right with me.
Just don't say Dogecoin to the moon and get kicked off your board.
David, you made a comment about like you microdose mushrooms daily. I don't know if it was daily, but you said you microdose.
At one point in time, sometimes it was daily, by the way. Like I've had points in my life it was daily.
So I'm just throwing out at this just as like a what if. So you microdose mushrooms. Now somebody that, you know, like me, I don't have an addictive personality. So for me, you know, I've taken Kratom, stopped, you know, I used to like smoking my weed before bed. I don't do that anymore. It doesn't bother me. So it sounds like you said if somebody's doing it with an efficacious dosage and they're following some sort of guidelines behind it, would it be fair to say that in your eyes, doing it the right way, Kratom might not be as such a negative connotation as people make it out to be?
Yes. In a simple statement, yes.
Okay.
But the question is will it be
because
done
people are going to
way?
watch this and be like, well, he was saying microdosing mushrooms is okay, but taking a little bit of Kratom every day isn't okay. So how does one of the
It's a drug. They're drugs, right?
Yes.
And the mechanism of action is so different. Like to me, we're not comparing apples and apples. We're comparing stigma.
No. Yes, that's what I was comparing.
But I can say yes to that statement. Old ladies used to sip on their tea and they would get some pain relief, right? And that's as simple as it really gets.
Exactly.
Because they didn't want to take painkillers. That was the kind of the origin of Kratom in the US was people didn't want to take painkillers. They found Kratom was very beneficial for them. And that was their lean into.
Well, what they would do also, I don't know if you know, in Southeast Asia, what they would do, they found the difference between chewing the leaf is what, you know, because there's a lot of cultures where they use it in like those, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, well, my gosh. When you have like people around you and you're all sitting down, I'm trying to think of, I'm brain farting right now.
Ceremony?
Like, yes. So people that, you know, in like Hawaii, in Southeast Asia, they would use it like ceremonial, whether they would chew on it versus brewing the leaf and sipping on it. So they found different benefits versus chewing the leaf versus brewing it as a tea. And, you know, it's been used for hundreds of years, if not even more. You know, based on the time of the day or the whatever they were celebrating or ceremony and stuff like that. So,
no, I think it's kind of like smoking DMT versus taking ayahuasca, right? People do it for a hard reset on their brain. They go down, they have ceremonies, things like that in a controlled environment, and it changes some people's lives. In a controlled environment with stipulations put in place. So that would be very similar to medications where if you're picking up your medication, you get 30 pills, that's one per day. And even then, people are addicted to medications because they're getting scripted it from a doctor so they think that it's okay. So I do think that there's great alternatives though for pain. Gabapentin is a good one. But it's GABAergic, so people will lean into that heavier, but at least it's not hitting an opioid receptor. There's no Trexone that makes you more sensitive to your natural opioids. There are alternatives that directly have similarities to Kratom, but Kratom is unique in a sense for sure. And it's also natural. And I think that's why people lean into it. Is when you get to chemical modifications of certain things to try to get an outcome to make something more addicting, that it gets even more dangerous than it already was to begin with. And even normal Kratom can technically be viewed as what the FDA said was dangerous and addicting potentially, and also non-useful is what they found. Probably because it probably has to do with the big pharma terminology where there's other drugs that are in the same category they deem safe.
So for me, when I threw out my back in 2020, right around when COVID was at its highest, and the doctors prescribed me Oxycontin or oxycodone. And on the bottle, it said it was a 30 milligram tablet. You could take one every 4 to 6 hours. I was taking one a day. Okay. And I never even used, like I took it for a total of 56 days. I was taking one a day because I couldn't even stand up. I told you on the phone, and I stopped taking it. And for 10 days, I went through, you might have think I was a heroin addict, how bad the withdrawals were from it. Whereas for me, I've taken Kratom for 6-8 months every day and stopped taking it for 2, 3, 4 weeks on end and never even had any, I would say 0 versus a 10 when I was doing the Oxy. So I also agree with the fact that it is individual basis and person to person. And like I tell people, and I've said this from the beginning, if you have an addictive personality, I've used this same one liner, either don't take it or tread very lightly with it, because it's also, it's personal depending upon who you are as a person. Everybody's going to have a different, they're going to have different effect versus different servings, versus somebody that has never taken something versus somebody that's used. Like I was telling you, when I was bodybuilding to, towards the end of my preps, I was having a really tough time sleeping. I was taking, not at the same time, but if I was taking Xanax, I'd have to take almost 3 milligrams of a Xanax. Or if the doctor was prescribing me Valium, I was taking upwards 40 milligrams of Valium to go to sleep, those are ridiculous dosages. So my serving size with Kratom, it hasn't changed. I've been on the same serving size since I've been taking it, no more, no less. So for me, and not saying those arguments aren't true, but for me, as somebody that doesn't have an addictive personality and has never run into the, the sweats or the this or the that, I always round it out with, well, they might have been taking Kratom, and what Kratom was it? How much of 7-OH was also in that Kratom they were taking, if it was even mostly 7-OH, and what else were they taking on top of that?
I think a statement that a lot of people don't understand is drugs are drugs, they work, right?
Yeah.
So even though you're getting used to the psychological changes, right? The neurochemical changes that are happening in the body, the drug still does what the drug is supposed to do, no matter what the dose. Kind of like you're taking steroids. You get used to being at 500 milligrams, but you're not getting that hit anymore.
Yep.
It's still working. It's not
Of
like
course.
it's not working. You're still taking 500 milligrams of testosterone. That's a concept that most people don't know. When you're taking a painkiller, you're still taking 30 milligrams of that painkiller, right? That is period. If drugs didn't work, Big Pharma would be out of business a long time ago, to be honest. So I think that's like, you're using it as a medication.
Yes.
It works for you. That's fine. People need to tread lightly, no matter what. With any drug, that could be scripted from your doctor.
Something that I think I found important and informative. Ryan, can you touch on why for our Uprising tinctures we use that 75% isolate? Because I found that to be very I didn't even realize that in the beginning until you told me what the reasoning was versus the feeling versus not the feeling. I don't think a lot of people understand the difference between like a 45% extract versus a 75% isolate. Can you just touch on that for the people out there understanding what it is and why we use one versus the other?
I can, and this is somewhere between anecdotal and scientifically validated. And so I need to share that before I go down this rabbit hole. When we look at our extracts, our products currently have 4 different extracts in various products. We have a 30%, a 45%, a 65%, and a 70% isolate. And to go down any level of safety study that's true and valid, everything starts with an in vitro study, which is just cell culture, if you're unfamiliar. And in cell culture, you're just trying to get a basis for understanding of what's going on, so you can start to decide where you want to test. Like what are the things you might want to test for an indication? It's kind of how I looked at it to start with. And in saying that, you take the same cells, right, liver cell cultures and a series of other things to see how the product interacts. And we saw some really fascinating things on a 30% extract versus a 75% or 70% pure isolate. And what ended up being was the speed at which the cells deteriorated. So all things equal, all same control environments, you take our 30% extract, 45, 65, and 70. The 30% extract saw more rapid cell deterioration. Now it's the same biomass that goes into it. It's a 1-pass yield versus 2. If I look at what makes a 30% extract versus 45, it's just how many times do we run it through our filtration process to keep it very general. And we saw the 70% isolate having incredibly slow cell deterioration, very comparable to just natural cell deterioration. It's not the same, but really close to that. Well, as we started looking, the anecdotal information that comes from a 30% extract, if we hop on Reddit, right? This is my own personal consumption. I'll make sure this is not scientifically validated yet.
Nate, I think you'll appreciate this a lot, because this is actually really cool what he's about to say.
The 30% extract, which is present in 2 of our products currently, Super K and Super K Extra Strong, as well as the Descend gel caps. If I look across the board, That which had the quickest cell deterioration also happens to be stated by being most relaxing, most sedative, and the most analgesic. Now, we're trying to validate why that is exactly, more than just cell deterioration. Then we go all the way to the other end, where you look at the 70% isolate with the slowest cell death deterioration. It's one of the things a guy said originally, he and Mark, right, our previous partner, and tons of respect for Mark and what he did for the company to get it to where it's at. Was you kind of fucked us over in Uprising. You put this stuff on the product and it doesn't feel the same anymore. You gave us the bullshit. So well, hold on a second. Wait. No, I'm paraphrasing, right? It's you guys know Guy. I mean, it's something pretty close to that. And I said, well, hold on a second. The 70% isolate saw the slowest cell deterioration and then had the in theory the most kind of energy focused mental clarity feel is what has been stated. It's one of the only products I consume. I take a Listerine type of strip, right? Sublingual. I take 25 milligrams maybe twice a month as a replacement to, I take mine personally as a replacement to caffeine. It gives me that feel. And so we didn't want a product in Uprising that you would feel, because I didn't want people to be chasing the feeling. I wanted them to be getting the outcome, not the feeling. Because if it's a feeling, especially in that space, like, I want more of that feeling, I want more of that feeling. And he's like, this shit doesn't work. I'm like, no, it's working exactly like it's supposed to work.
And when we first joined forces with Mid 45, I didn't know that. And that was something that I was educated on, because I was used to taking it. And not that I never chased the feeling, but I was used to feeling a certain way. And I noticed that I wasn't. And I thought that we did something different or had a lesser product, when I found out a 70% isolate is actually more expensive than a 30% and extract. So for me, I was also, as much as I thought I was educated, I also learned something, which is, we did that. So what happens to people like Caleb, they don't chase that head body feeling, that they're taking it for a reason, or taking it for a result, not just for a feeling of a certain way. So I think that's very important, because that was, we did, and Ryan did that purposely to try to combat any of that negative connotation that certain Kratom products have.
Don't good businesses make sales off of outcomes and results? So that's just one thing. I just want to laugh about that really fast. Now the other thing about that, and this is just hypothetical, right? So if it's degrading faster, maybe you get the dopamine hit faster, but also the come down. So you're actually getting that rebound and it's pulling you down rather than up. And then the steady state one, where it's lasting a longer period of time, is releasing that dopamine over an extended period of time. So you're feeling it rather than almost a rebound, almost withdrawal, like, because that's technically a withdrawal like effect. If the dopamine is down now from going high, it's more sedative. Don't know, or maybe it has to do with serotonin causing a more, it's probably serotonin where, yeah, it's driving up serotonin and it's creating a relaxation effect, but in a much higher, faster manner. So it's neurotransmitter related, probably.
Well, absolutely, Dave, and that's what we're chasing right now. And it's also saying, right, the isolate is just mitragynine. We've gotten rid of, I mean, there's literally trace elements of anything else. It's 100% just mitragynine, which on one side now bastardizes my entire model. This is where this gets really fun, because if I can deem Kratom to be full spectrum Kratom with the proper alkaloid profile, I will have to stop making that product, and we'll gladly stop making that product. It'll just cease to exist until we figure out that pathway. I share that because I think quite often someone sits in front of a camera or a microphone and everything's geared around making their business better and more profitable. And I truly am focused on, how do we make this a long-term industry and good for a novice consumer? And that's going to hurt us in some aspects for a period of time. Over a longer period of time, it's better for everybody. So I'm with you. I think that as we get deeper and deeper into the mechanism of action of each individual alkaloid, and then what happens when you take something like mitragynine and a trace element of another part of the substack of alkaloids, what's the unlock that happens there? Because each one of the alkaloids has a different mechanism of action and different bonding propensity to even different opioid receptors. Like, it's not it's not like they're all mu opioid receptors. And they all, no. You have antagonists and a lot of different things that we could go really deep in the science of. It might be pretty boring, but we don't fully know all these things yet. That's what we just keep coming back to. I think what you're sharing, Guy, is incredibly impactful. Same thing with all of us. Tread lightly. There's not one size fits all. There's not everybody should consume it. There's not like take as little as humanly possible, consume as little as you possibly can, as infrequently as you can. But I would say that with I'm someone that microdoses psilocybin, I'm someone that microdoses LSD, I'm someone that microdoses ketamine, I'm someone that has DMT pens. I'm like, I am exploring the bounds of consciousness where simultaneously it's in very, very safe controlled amounts that I'm aware enough to determine how am I feeling, checking in with some of those biomarkers. What's going on with my resting heart rate? What's going on with my heart rate variability? What's going on with my gut microbiome? What's going on with my blood panels? Like, this is not just some science experiment. Like, oh, I feel better, so I'm going to take more. Like, hold on, wait. But that's not everybody, and not everybody has the ways and means to afford that either, right? It's not necessarily the least expensive way to consume products to do level testing. So I think overall, we're not going to put this genie back in the bottle. Like,
No.
this is where the industry, the kratom industry in the US is somewhere between $2 and $5 billion a year annually. Even if it gets banned tomorrow, there's just a black market instantly that somebody synthesizes it, turns into something else, adds 4 molecules to it, calls it a new product, and boom, it's back on the shelf. We're way past that to me. Now, in hindsight, it would have been great to go down that path and have it follow more traditional, I'll say, third classification, not pharmaceutical, not dietary supplements. But we're past that point. So now it's saying, how do you inform people? Just because you're famous, your favorite bodybuilder shows that they're consuming it, they might be somebody that we're sponsoring. I'm open to that. I've asked everybody consistently to say, this is just my experience. I can't guarantee it's going to be this way. I don't know if it's going to be this way for you. This is how I feel on it. I haven't stopped taking it for a long time. I don't know if I'm now addicted to it or not, because I don't want to stop taking because I like the way I feel. I want them to fucking own all of it. No different than I wouldn't allow someone to become a sponsored athlete until they consume the product for at least 30 days. So they could actually say, like, I like it. I enjoy it. It makes me feel X, Y, or Z. And that's not the drug dealer methodology of let me give you some so you're hooked and now you want more. Like, not that at all. I just think in the supplement industry, how many people get lured into something because they get a small check every month. And so they don't give a shit. They just post it and promote it. It's like, no, read about it, understand it, consume it, share it. And if you like it and you're really pro what we're about, then come on board. Then we can have the conversation what that can look like.
I think
I was going to say, I just wanted to add, I do like the sublingual strip idea actually, because I feel like that sort of limits the use a little bit, where the droppers and the packets and all that kind of stuff, it's very easy to go overboard. Where I don't think many people are going to be like, oh, a strip, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I do like that idea. That's sort of good.
Can I add to the strip thing too? It's also so one of the issues with kratom is actually the liver toxicity behind it for certain people. Like we've seen liver enzyme increases, and especially in the bodybuilding space in particular, we're blasting our liver at all times just by training in the gym, to be honest. Like, it doesn't have to do just with steroid use. So sublingual, at least you're passing the first pass on the liver, so it's less liver toxic as well. So I just want to add that.
Yeah, and David, in probably a separate aside conversation, we could have it now. We figured out an encapsulation methodology that we partnered up with a group that has. You have to know acetaminophen is very liver toxic, right? You consume what 12 grams or whatever it is, and you die. Like, it's pretty instant. They've patented an encapsulation methodology that you can consume 3 times that much with zero toxicity. It's really fascinating stuff.
Is that what they did with aspirin, the liquid gel where it goes into the intestines and it passes through the liver or something like that, so you don't get the liver toxicity behind it? Oh, we can sidebar.
Oh yeah, no, I don't mind sharing it on here. It's not our proprietary science. It's somebody that we're partnered in with that they've really figured out a multi-stage encapsulation methodology of the molecule itself. They've designed their own trap system to in highest level possible encapsulate in a form of maltodextrin that gets it to pass through the first pass. It's really wild stuff where we're seeing zero liver toxicity on kratom. Zero. Not like a little bit, like zero. And so that's the thing where there are, again, I just want to keep reiterating, in any industry, there's some people that are actually trying to watch out for people. There are also a bunch of charlatans. There's a bunch of, like, it's so fun. Case in point, we could make a kilo of 7-hydroxy right now. Our hard costs all the way in would be maybe $3,000. The current market value for a kilo to a manufacturing business is $50,000. I could turn out as many of those a week as we want right now and sell every one of them. We'd be making tens of millions. Forget that. So take that, and I just put it in product, put Mid 45 on it. We could blast. I mean, Nate, you're a perfect example. You're buying $30, you're probably buying $30 packets. Those $30 packets are probably being sold for $15 to the store. It's probably costing the person that makes it $3 or $4. They're just churning out cash right now. It's not good for
I
people.
no. What I was going to say is I think this is something that maybe we should, maybe once a month. I like the group we have here. I like the conversation, and it doesn't have to just be about Kratom. It could be about supplements. I think with all our different backgrounds, we have all different feats of life. Myself, Nate, Dave, Ryan. I mean, we're very like-minded, but we come from different, perspectives. And I think this is something that the not just bodybuilding, but the industry as a whole, whether it's fitness, whether it's, just men in general, whether between mental health, addiction, it's almost like Ryan's like 15-minute talks, but extended versions of four different guys with four different viewpoints, but all like-minded. I know we've been on for 2 hours. I don't want to keep you guys any longer. So Nate, I just want to ask you, being that Caleb was kind of the highlighted the past couple of weeks, anybody that's going through any sort of addiction issues or having any problems, not just being with 7OH or whatever it is, what is the best, and we'll wrap it up with, what's the best advice of somebody that you can give them that might be having like a trial and tribulation? What is your best advice you would give that person to get out of that rabbit hole and be where you're at, as somebody that has done it more than once and successfully? And I hope this is the last time that you have to deal with it, because I applaud you on your efforts to do so. And like I told you in my text message to you, being a bodybuilder and seeing you and your physique, I think you have the ability to be one of the best bodybuilders in the world. And I sometimes think that people's mental state, I think sometimes the best one-liner I ever heard was from Kai Green, and it said most bodybuilders, but let's just say people in general, just can't get out of their own way. So what is the best advice you can give somebody, you and then David, and because I want to hear your guys' opinion on that, and then we'll wrap it up there.
Honestly, it's going to sound a little weird, but isolation is what kills people. So when a lot of people have come forward and shared with me, and they were so grateful just to share with me, could name off 20 people that have shared addiction with me, and they have no one to vent to, or because a lot of us people dealing with addiction, we feel alone. We feel like we're the only ones going through this. So even sometimes just to share with another addict is so powerful. So that's why like meetings are so successful for me, at least.
Yeah.
I go to meetings and, because anyone else, I could tell you guys whatever, you're not going to relate to me. You know what I mean? Where I go to those meetings and those other addicts, I tell them and they're like, yeah, I get it, bro. You know what I mean? And like, it's just a different type of connection. You know what I mean? So like, obviously, that's just huge for me, because a lot of people, what happens is internally they hold it in. If they're struggling with addiction, they're not going to go out and, say stuff, and you know what I mean? So just sharing with other people, you know what I mean? There's so many resources out there, and don't be, for those people that are struggling out there, don't be scared to reach out to a hotline, a call, go to a meeting. You never know. Every time I go to a meeting, I feel better. You know what I mean? And you don't have to be like a full-blown addict, but just to go there and just hear and listen, and not feel alone is huge to me, because we all have our own demons. You know what I mean? So when you have those demons and you left even anything in life, right? And you leave that stuff inside, just like if you had sex abuse when you were younger, whatever, you know what I mean? Any kind of abuse or violence, blah, blah, blah. You leave that internally. We all know this, you know what I mean? Like, this is where a lot of men, mental health, we struggle. We leave that shit inside, and that eats us up. And that's like internal, our internal demons. So just sort of getting out there and voicing it, or, even maybe a therapist or whatever, I think just getting your voice out there and venting, especially as men, we are known to hold it in. We got to be strong and tough, sometimes being vulnerable can be the best medicine, honestly. And then obviously, like if people are, I find a lot of people that, with the 7OH or whatever, when they're going through withdrawals, they don't know what to do. So, that's going to be scary, and don't be afraid to look up a treatment center and call someone and ask for help, or, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff, because a lot of these guys, they've never been through this before. They're ignorant to addiction. They don't know like what's going on. Like with Caleb, right? He went to the hospital, just because he's like, what is going on? I don't know how to deal with this. I've never, You know, the first
Well, you
time.
know, it's funny. I did exactly what you did when I was driving home from the dentist 2 days after my last epidural, and I stopped taking oxy. I started spiraling out of control. I called my buddy, who's an 8-year recovering addict, and I said, "Is what's going on? And what the fuck do like?" I called, like I was vulnerable in the moment, and I called him, and I'm like, "Is this is what happening? And if it is what's happening, what can I do?" And he said, "You can either go home, take another pill, and try to wean off it, or stay in your house, and it's going to be the worst week of your fucking life." But I had somebody to lean on. And I
Right.
think your point is, don't be afraid to be vulnerable in that situation.
100%. And there are tons of detox out there. I know they can be expensive, but like if you do feel like you're stuck and you can't get off it, they do have medicines that can help you wean off it. They can help you, get through that withdrawal phase, which is the hardest part. Like we
Yep.
talked with you, it's like me,
Yep.
I've been through it. A day feels like a year, bro. You know what I mean? It feels
Rough.
like a living hell. So a lot of these guys, what happens is they just start taking kratom again. They might go a day, and then they're like, oh, I can't do this, or
Yeah.
7 or whatever, you know what I mean? And just go back, and it's that vicious cycle, So there are a lot of like resources out there as far as just like detoxes that have medications that are going to help,
Yeah.
a little bit less painful, less, you're not going to feel as horrible essentially.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is getting through that withdrawal phase,
Yep.
because that's the hardest part, let's be honest, that first, like it can be a week to 2 weeks even,
Rough.
and it's rough, so just getting through that phase is the biggest part.
No, that's a great piece of advice. And Dave, I know you've had, you come from, like you said, a background of people that are addicts. So what have you seen? What's the best piece of advice you could give some of these guys that are struggling and going through any of that stuff?
100%. So I just want to start off first and foremost, everyone has anxiety and depression. And if you're going through anything, if you don't have anyone, and even if you have someone and you just want someone that doesn't judge you, feel free to reach out to me. I've had plenty of people reach out to me, so feel free to. I'll just be an ear, or if you just want to hear me talk, just to calm yourself down, which probably won't calm you down, I'm more than happy to do so. But when I used to have panic disorder, which turned out to be Graves when I was going through it really badly, listening to a stranger's voice actually calmed me down. That was just one thing that calmed me down. So as men, we do keep things bottled up. Don't let things bottle up for too long, because then it will create a spiral and you're going to lean into a crutch to get you through that time. Again, mine was the gym at that time. Thank God it was the gym. It could have been way worse. There wasn't a lot in my college town, so it could have been alcohol for sure. And the next thing is being there from around addicts. The biggest thing was just being there for them when they needed you. You cannot fix them. That's a really hard one. You can't fix an addict because you have to treat it like a disease. This is a disease that they have to get over, but you can be there to support them. And this could be as simple as helping them get out of the house. Like isolation is the killer. Getting them out of the house in the sunlight, walking around trees, grounding yourself, the hardest thing is lifting your head up and realizing what's around you, looking up at the sky and being blessed that it's a blue sky outside, or if it's raining outside. I love thunderstorms. It relaxes me. Don't think about that it's raining outside and you wish the sun was out. Start changing your mind into a positive mindset, which is difficult to do, but it can be done, and just be there to support them in whatever way, shape, or form. Sometimes it's going to be listening to them. Sometimes it's going to be talking to them. Sometimes it's going to be driving them to the gym or getting them outside for a walk. That was the biggest thing. Like I remember, it was like God put words in my mouth for the one that was a heroin addict, by the way. I accidentally saved the person's life, and they're very close to my family, by the way. I'm not going to say who it is. And randomly, I was like, are you on heroin right now? By the way, I didn't know heroin was around at that point in time, had no clue. I was like, and as it came out of my mouth, I said, what just came out of my mouth? I didn't know it was a drug, by the way, at this time. This is before it was going rampant. And sure enough, the next day when we were driving to the gym together, he goes, I've been sober for 2 days. I was like, oh, okay. Like, what is it? Like weed, pills? And he's like, heroin. I was like, okay. And I accidentally told someone that was also close to me, and they put them in rehab. They failed the outpatient one, which I told them it was going to fail. And then they put them in inpatient, and he's been sober ever since. So
that's awesome. So Ryan, being that you're probably one of the most busiest men that I've ever met in my entire life, I will. I want you to close it out with any statement for the good, the bad, the ugly, however you want, because this was an idea that I had, and I was blessed that David and Nate turned around and were like, absolutely, I think it's a great idea, and you were like, set it up, let's do it. So, any closing I feel like a lawyer. Any closing arguments or statements you want to make before we wrap this up? Because we've been on for over 2 hours, which literally feels like an hour, but I can't believe we've been on for like 2 hours and 20 minutes at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. I'll start with, I just appreciate the conversation. I think that it's a line that comes from a guy named Ben Hardy, that all growth starts by telling the truth. And the truth requires us to have conversations that could feel challenging at times. They could provide new perspective. And I really I value things like this opportunity, which then leads to another conversation that on the backside of what Nate shared. A long time ago, I went through, I'll call it a men's training called Wake Up Warrior by a guy named Garrett White. And he shared a statement that's connected with me all the way through. And that is that pain shared is pain divided. And as men, when we hold on to it, it's not dividing out anywhere. It's actually multiplying into itself. And so I don't know what it's like to have a full-fledged bout with addiction personally. I don't know what it's like for that. I do know what it's like to watch on the other side. And just on the backside of what David said, there's nothing I could do to fix or try to solve, which is my natural inclination. I want to solve my buddy. I want to help him. And so much as a listening ear and the way that that can be interpreted, which then will dovetail in the final statement I'll say, which is, if you're feeling like you have developed an unhealthy habit with our product, or I'll even say any product, do me a favor and send us an email so we can help you stop taking our product. We'll provide resources, we'll provide connections, we'll provide anything that we possibly can. None of this is deemed to harm someone. We want to be a net positive in people's lives, nothing more than that. And if it doesn't have to be that you are uncertain on where to go or what you have to do, we want to help you. We'll help guide that path. It's not that we're not charging something for it. There's plenty of resources, state by state, county by county, federally. There's all types of ways to get some of that help. And we would love to be a part of the solution versus adding to any level of problem.
Well, I think I just found the thumbnail, and maybe if we continue this, the name of the podcast, Pain Shared and Pain Divided. So this is awesome. Guys, I appreciate it, and I absolutely look forward. We're definitely going to do this again. I think this is something that needs to be done more often, and I think the transparency with all four of us is something that this industry needs and the world needs. So I appreciate everybody's time. Ryan, thanks for jumping on. David, thank you for clearing your day. And Nate, thanks for the transparency and the honesty with the podcast. I appreciate you guys. And we're gonna post this up and hopefully get a lot of eyes on this and get a lot of people more educated on a lot of different avenues in life. So appreciate you guys. And until next time, you got 3 mouths, well, and 1 mutant, Nate, on this one. So you all be good, stay safe, and good luck to everybody competing at the New York Pro, especially my boy Nick Walker. So y'all stay safe. God bless. We're out.